Lucy Lou, with my girl Drew, Cameron D and Destiny, Charlie's Angels, come on. Bring it. Question, tell me what you think about me. I buy my own diamonds and I buy my own rings. Only ring your celly when I'm feeling lonely. When it's all over, please get up and leave. Question, tell me how you feel about this. Try to control me, boy, you get dismissed. Pay my own condo and I pay my own bills. Always 50-50 in relationships. The shoes on my feet, I bought. The clothes I'm wearing, I bought. The rock I'm rocking, I bought. 'Cause I depend on me. If I wanted the watch I'm wearing, I bought. The house I live in, I bought. The car I'm driving, I bought. I depend on me. I depend on me. All the women who independent, throw your hands up at me. All the honeys who making money, throw your hands up at me. All the mamas who rock the dollar, throw your hands up at me. All the ladies who truly feel me, throw your hands up at me. Girl, I didn't know you could get down like that.
25 years ago today. That's all it took to have a number one song on the U.S. singles charts. And it stayed there for 11 weeks. That would be Independent Women, Part 1 by Destiny's Child. Went to number one and stayed there for 11 weeks on this November the 12th, back in the year 2000. It came from Destiny's Child's third album called Survivor, and it first appeared, Independent Women, Part 1, the song did, on the soundtrack of the film Charlie's Angels, which you could probably have picked up from the beginning of the song when the stars of said movie were name-dropped. Lucy Liu, Drew Barrymore, Cameron Diaz. There you go, some Destiny's Child to start our show for this Wednesday morning, the 12th of November. Hey, have I told you the story? I probably have, because it's one of my best flexes ever. And I don't have a lot of flexes to flex about, if you know what I'm saying. But there was a time, it was a really good night for me. Me and some friends all sitting around a campfire, listening to tunes, enjoying a great summer's night. Started to play a little Name That tune with every song that came up next on the mix. And I was crushing it. I was being admired by everyone around me. It was the greatest moment of my life. Okay, not really, but it was a really nice night. And people were impressed. And I was happy that they were impressed. But then you see the mix changed from the songs that I know in the 1970s to more modern stuff. And eventually, all of my answers to every song that played was Destiny's Child. I don't know nothing about no songs that were recorded after 1979. What do you want from me? I can't throw the ball and catch the ball. I can only, I don't know. I'm just getting all confused here on this Wednesday morning. But it was a great moment in my life, my adult life, until the modern music came on and I was as confused as the next person. I'm not sure it's ever been a great moment in life being a Leafs fan. There have been some times that we got pretty excited only to have our hearts broken. So I think I'm just going to leave all Leafs talk to the side right now. And I'm not jumping off the bandwagon. I am loyal. I am true blue. But it's a bad day when the greatest hockey player in the world, Mr. Austin Matthews, is out with an injury, didn't finish last night's game, third loss in a row for the Toronto Maple Leafs. We can't get a goaltender who can stop a puck. And Austin Matthews can't score the goals and stop the shots, right? He can't do it all, and now he can't do anything because he's suffered an injury. And things are not going well in Leafland. So we're just going to leave that right where it is. However, I did want to touch on something as we turn to the issues of the day. I mentioned it yesterday when talking about the City of Kitchener's council meeting and the notes I get from council after their meetings, you know, key decisions. And one of those decisions at Kitchener Council was the endorsement of the uptake on the additional dwelling units that are made possible under new housing bylaws here in the community. The idea, obviously, the more homes, the better. Let's bring down those price pressures. Let's find places for people to live. The spirit of the additional dwelling units was really around adding a tiny home, or maybe removing a single-family home and turning it into a multiplex up to 4 units on the same footprint. It's not too out of keeping with the neighborhood. But I shared with you then the story in South Kitchener where somebody who owns the home, apparently it's owned by somebody or some property real estate trust out of Toronto, has built an entire 1,600 square foot home in the backyard of their existing home. And families are not exactly, neighbors are not exactly thrilled by it. Turns out this is not just happening here in Kitchener. I take you to Guelph, where I received an email yesterday from Dean. He even shared photos. On October the 1st, the neighbor behind my house started to dig a 5-foot foundation for an additional dwelling unit for an 860 square foot bungalow in the backyard of an 1,140 square foot bungalow. The only thing needed was a permit for a detached garage or shed. The front house has been a rental for years, a bungalow with 2 apartments. Please, someone explain how this is going to help lower rental prices and help with a housing crisis. And Dean says, much like we are seeing in Kitchener, in Guelph, his backyard halfway down a hill will be staring downhill into the bedrooms of the new houses in behind him. He's lived there for 18 years. He had no say or input on the change. I'm all for helping out our housing situation, says Dean, but expecting investors and builders to do anything other than making a profit is foolhardy and the type of thinking that got us into this crisis. Doug Ford is doing more damage to this province than I have ever witnessed or experienced. The only thing I'm not sure of is that last point, because I remember Doug Ford early on talking about not having fourplexes as of right. Municipalities have gone ahead and done this in many situations, but nonetheless, I think Dean is onto something here. Why would we expect builders and investors to do anything other than something that helps them turn a profit? So we're seeing it in South Kitchener. And to be fair here, and to be very clear about it, not every situation has been handled in this way. I think many have taken the spirit of the new opportunities in stride here. There are tiny homes being built. There are in-law suites being established, etc. But in some cases, we are seeing this very thing, both in South Kitchener and, according to Dean, in his neighborhood in Guelph, where essentially an entirely new home, 860 square feet. The one in South Kitchener, I'm told, is about 1,600 square feet being built in the backyard of existing homes in the community. That is a tough pill to swallow, to say the very least. One more quick note just before we get to our Farwell Show 5. And a fella who was a mainstay in the beautiful town of Elmira, I learned yesterday, has passed away. In fact, Schaaf, as he's affectionately known, Gary Schaefer, just called our show last week to inquire about or share information about Remembrance Day, poppies, etc. Because if it's one thing that Schaaf was very involved in his retirement, he drove a bus, made sure kids got to school safely. He enjoyed his trailer with his lovely wife, Jocelyn, and he was very involved in veterans' causes, the Legion in Elmira, and just an all-around good guy. And I learned yesterday that he passed away at the far too young age, at least from where I'm sitting, of 79. So to the family of Gary Schaefer and those who knew him well, our sincere condolences on the loss of a guy that really stood up for all the right things in our community, for sure.
It's the final countdown.
All right, let's get to your Farwell Show 5 for this Wednesday morning, the 12th of November. Number one, top diplomats from the G7 countries We'll be hearing from Ukraine's foreign minister today in southern Ontario. Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand says the meeting in Niagara-on-the-Lake will reaffirm collective support for Ukraine in the face of Russia's aggression. Anand also invited ministers from several other nations so they can all talk about critical minerals and economic resilience in the face of U.S. tariffs. Number 2, 6 local boxers will compete at the Canadian Elite National Championships later this month. Scarlett Delgado, Caitlin Clark, Danielle Doherty, Marine Kak, Yaqub Al-Arabasi, and Rupinder Kaur will all compete in the tournament starting November the 26th. Number 3 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, the Salvation Army in Kitchener, kicking off its annual Christmas Kettle campaign this morning. This year's campaign goal is $175,000, with all funds supporting local programs that help families and individuals in need throughout the year. Today's kickoff happens at 11 this morning at the Zares on Ottawa Street at Strasbourg. Number 4, you might remember this going back about a month. I was invited to Brantford to take part in a gala and charity auction in support of the Brantford Boys and Girls Club. Got there. I mean, fine folks, incredible folks in the beautiful city of Brantford. But boy, oh boy, did they give me a hard time about being from Kitchener Rangers land. You know, they're very passionate supporters of their Brantford Bulldogs there in the Telephone City. But nonetheless, it was a great night. Learned a lot about a terrific organization that's supporting kids in the community. And it turns out they did pretty well on that night with their gala and charity auction because they raised $9,500, money that will go directly back into programs and services through the Brantford Boys and Girls Club that empower children, youth, and families in Brantford. Great job by all. And number 5 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, Sunbeam, a local organization that supports people living with developmental disabilities to maintain dignity, belonging, safety, and independence, is launching a community appeal to support its hospital care program. The program will provide hands-on support during hospital stays. Anyone wishing to donate and support this community appeal can visit sunbeamcommunity.ca/donate. And that is your Farwell Show 5 for this Wednesday morning, the 12th of November. I hope you heard Justin Kohler talking this morning during All News Mornings with Christine Clark and Mark Douglas about the challenges that the township of Woolwich is facing when it comes to its budget. One of the people who delegated to Woolwich Council last week at their budget meeting said, listen, I mean, in my words, it would have been, come on with your coming on. But the delegate said, it's time to put on your big boy and big girl pants here and make some tough decisions. If staff comes to you with a budget that says a 22% increase is required, you tell them no. And you tell them this is what the increase should be, and this is what we're going to do. Now, Woolwich Township Mayor Sandy Shantz made it clear that the 22% increase brought forward was an increase to kind of fix the mess that the township's finances are currently in. If we had to catch up on this infrastructure, if we had to do this and that, what would it look like? 22% is not the number that Woolwich is ultimately going to land on, but the pressures are evident, and we talked about this earlier this week on the show. They're behind on funding important infrastructure. Historically, they have not had tax increases that meet the community's needs. And frankly, we've learned through this entire process that they've been using outdated technology to try to help them through the budget process. They're trying to upgrade on the technology side and get their finances in order. But I will not forget the councillor in Woolwich, Nathan Cadeau, who suggested, I mean, are we at the point where we might have to just tell the community we're out of money?
There could be potentially a fourth option there, and that's that the township just files for insolvency. I think that we're at the point where the lowest tax rate, we have the lowest reserves. At what point do we just have to file insolvency if we can't afford to raise the money? And I mean, I'm serious about that. This scares me.
It scares Councillor Cadeau. That kind of language probably scares a lot of us in the community, especially if you're in Woolwich Township. We're going to talk more about that with Rob Deutschman when he joins us this morning at 11:30 for Political R&D. Rob has been through a municipal budget or two in his time. But when we talked about this earlier this week, I also reminded you that in Wilmot, we've got a situation where they've kind of farmed out, if you will, the budget for this year. Staff, I guess, not capable of bringing in something that is reasonable, helpful to the township. Not sure what the case is, but Mayor Natasha Salonen exercising her strong mayor powers and saying, you know what, we're going to get the KPMG consultancy to put together our 2026 budget. Not everybody in Wilmot is exactly thrilled with that either. And that came to a head at Wilmot Township's council meeting earlier this week. I'll share some of that with you as we continue the Mike Farwell Show this morning. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. So there is a proposed 22% tax increase on the table in Woolwich Township, which will likely end up coming in far lower than 22%. But it's the starting figure. If we have to fix everything all at once, what does fixing everything all at once look like? Especially considering the last 3 years in Woolwich Township, we've seen a cumulative tax increase of 26%, 8%, 8%, 10% in Woolwich. And so from that township, we move over to Wilmot Township, which you'll remember came forward last year with a proposed tax increase from a budget prepared by staff of greater than 50%. It was an astronomical number. Ultimately, they settled in and around 20, which is cold comfort. I mean, sure, you say we started at 50 plus, we end up around 20. Oh, good for us. But that's a big increase for the folks in Wilmot Township. This year, a number of 9% is being floated around, and the township has decided to farm out its budget process to consultants with KPMG. There was discussion about the budget at Wilmot's council meeting this week, and Mayor Salonen had this to say.
I want us to all have the ability to see what is the ideal case of right-sizing with priorities acknowledging the current context. So I'm leaving that to staff to really decide what that looks like coming forward, but then having the supportive information, and even in some of the documents I've already seen Ash's team have, I think you guys are going to be really pleased with the detail to explain each assumption made, then allowing us to make the decision on what priorities are we dictating. And so that's also part of the reason for having these input sessions, to hear from the community as to what they would also like to see prioritized, so that when we see the information come forward. But at this point, I've left the 9% in as kind of the general ask, because it's something that we as council agreed to already last year. If it turns out through numbers and looking at actuals and that's not the recommendation that comes forward, then that's something that we can decide as we're reviewing draft documents. But at this point in time, I just want to better understand the scope of what are the real numbers, what are the priorities now, and what makes sense as proceeding forward.
So how do we prioritize the various needs in Wilmot Township? Sounds like a typical budget exercise, and Councillor Javier Sadu seems to be of the mind that one of the priorities should be finding savings in the budget.
This is, I believe, our fourth different kind of way of doing it, fourth different treasurer, now with KPMG. I know I've been barking up the tree of I wanted to see more information as far as cost analysis, the costing of things, and the pros and cons of looking at services if we do decide to cut or et cetera. So I am encouraged by KPMG and Ash and his team for taking this on to hopefully we can see a more clear picture, more detailed breakdown of our finances, and Not to say that we haven't had it in the past, but now we have a professional team that is going to be laser focused on this. So I am looking forward to this process as far as the breakdown and having the ability to find any efficiencies or things that we can identify that we can look at without burdening our taxpayers that much more. So that's my comment. I am looking forward to this, and my only thing I would say to KPMG is really dig deep into the finances and the numbers and understand that our taxpayers are not a bottomless pit that we can just keep going back to, and we need to do some serious soul searching amongst us as a township and our organization to see where we can find efficiencies.
I think that sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? And we've heard that in the past from those of us who are paying the taxes. Hey, we're not a bottomless pit over here. Right? The pocket does have a bottom to it somewhere. And I can't help but think, I mean, when we are using a consultancy to create the municipality's budget, that is telling us something about the lack of expertise on staff, at least at the time of asking KPMG to do this. That's my sense for sure. And as you might expect, those who did show up, and there were very few at this council meeting in Wilmot Township this week, not happy with the direction they're hearing from council. This is Delegate Barry Wolf.
I've been here several times, and my common theme is how does Wilmot consult with residents and taxpayers when making its decisions, and two, how do you spend our tax money? The guy that pays the bill has had a lot of participation in the process in the past. We've always been able to look at a budget and be able to analyze it, do a gap analysis between previous ones, and respond to it. There's nothing this year. At the bottom in small print, there's no operations budget, there's no capital budget, there's no utilities budget, there's no asset management plan, there's no risk analysis. I'm really disappointed that there seems to be two groups as I'm sitting here. Those in the know and those don't know what's going on. You're like me. You don't know what the process is going to be, and I heard you say you don't know what's going on. I'm really frustrated. Do you guys not talk to each other? I'm really frustrated. Maybe that's why nobody's here. Nobody listens.
Does anybody listen to township council meetings when they're out there doing their job, trying to put some roast beef and mashed potatoes on the table, trusting that their council will take care of things? I have no doubt that the public in Wilmot Township and elsewhere will have the opportunity to review and better understand the budgets that our municipalities are dealing with. I still think when we see the struggles, particularly in the townships, they are making for us the case for amalgamation and getting more expertise around the table from one level of local government, I think. But that aside, one of the other underlying issues here is all of the pressure that is on a municipality thanks to that pressure being applied from above, primarily the province, costs being downloaded, municipalities, townships, and cities alike being asked to do more things than they've ever been asked to do before without a corresponding increase in provincial funding to do those things. So the province tries to clean up its books by putting the pressure, the financial pressure, onto municipalities, and it ain't working. There are some challenging times out there as we are into budget season. I'm going to get you an update now from the 570 News Center, and then let's talk measles, because they're back. Why? This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. As I am sure you know, we, as a country, have lost our status of being measles-free. Our measles elimination status, acquired back in 1998, has been revoked by the Public Health Agency of Canada. This is because in the last year or so, we as a nation have recorded more than 5,000 measles cases in 9 provinces and 1 territory. And that represents cases enough to have the Public Health Agency revoke that status for measles elimination. Catherine Carstairs is a professor in the Department of History at the University of Guelph and joins us to talk about it. And Catherine, I'm curious as we get this conversation underway as to whether or not this loss of the measles elimination status even surprises you.
It didn't surprise me, given the scale of the outbreak that we've seen this year. So, yeah, I don't think it's particularly surprising.
How do you think we got here?
Well, I think there's a few factors at work. I mean, we saw, of course, that especially in the aftermath of COVID-19, that concerns about vaccines are rising. Vaccine hesitancy is rising. And we know that in this particular outbreak of the measles that we've seen this past year, the vast majority of people who've gotten the measles have been unvaccinated. So these are people who are choosing not to, vaccinate their children. And I think, the increase in the number of people who've been concerned about vaccines, obviously escalated during the COVID-19 pandemic, but we've seen a growing anti-vax movement in Ontario and in Canada more broadly since the 1980s.
When we look back at that historically, Catherine, one of the things that jumps out to me is well before the pandemic, and when you referenced decades ago, the concerns over links between the MMR, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, and autism. And that was circulating long before COVID-19 was a thing.
Absolutely. But one of the things that when my co-author and I looked at the rise of vaccine hesitancy in the 1980s and 90s is that it goes far beyond concerns about autism. That was the most famous. There was a Wakefield study that had to be retracted. And so that study has gotten a lot of attention and raised a lot of concern amongst parents. But actually, parents have a much wider set of concerns about vaccination than the possibility that it might lead to autism. There's also concerns about and again, these are not real, these have not been proven concerns, but parents are worried. And you can find in the anti-vaccine literature links being drawn between vaccines and cancer, vaccines between a range of autoimmune conditions, vaccines and childhood asthma. So parents have, if they're diving into the anti-vax literature, they're actually coming across a whole range of concerns that go far beyond autism.
What do we know about the anti-vax literature? Can we or should we dismiss it as simply anti-science?
Oh, no, I don't think it's anti-science at all, actually. Having spent a lot of time reading it, actually, a lot of it is written by physicians. A lot of it is based in scientific studies. Now, often those scientific studies are interpreted incorrectly, the statistics are misused. But actually, it's replete with information about, this study shows X, Y, and Z. So if you're coming to it without a lot of knowledge, it's actually very, very persuasive. And I think a lot of these parents, are very interested in the science. They want to see the numbers. And actually, one of the intriguing things is that often the information from public health tends to be much less detailed in terms of, its citation of specific scientific studies. So I think on the surface, it often seems the anti-vax literature often seems very persuasive to people, and it often seems very based in science. So I think it's more about lack of trust in our in medical professionals, in the institutions of society, than it is about lack of faith in science.
I can't help but think that in the modern context, a figure like Robert Kennedy Jr. Is certainly not helping vaccine uptake.
Definitely not. Yeah, that's his role right now is a tragedy in terms of promoting vaccination, which has been proven to be a very safe and effective health measure.
So, what would the best way be for us to approach those or work with those who are vaccine hesitant or anti-vaccine?
I think, a lot of what needs to be done is really, and this is time-consuming work, unfortunately, and expensive work. But I think that parents who are hesitant about vaccination really need to sort of be sat down with and have their questions answered by someone that they trust. Now, often this would be their pediatrician or family doctor who can really explain the reasons why vaccination is important, not just in terms of protecting their own child. Maybe I'm optimistic, but I think one of the reasons we should be really emphasizing the positives of vaccination is emphasizing how this protects the entire community, So it's not just about the choice you're making for your child. It's also about the choice that you're making for the child in your child's class who might be medically vulnerable and, who might have an extremely adverse reaction to getting something like the measles. So it's not just about your kid. It's about everyone and keeping the entire community safe. And I think, if maybe people better understood the logic behind the importance of vaccination, that people might be more apt to vaccinate their children.
What about a better...
I should say, most people are still vaccinating their children, right?
What about better understanding of the ingredients, for lack of a better term, in the vaccines that we are using?
Yeah, I think that's really important because, one of the things that, the anti-vaccination literature always does is list this long list of scary ingredients, right? And we're kind of used to this, right? If we look at a lot of our food packages, or if we look at our shampoo bottle, there's a long list of scary ingredients, that we don't, the vast majority of us don't know what these things are. So I think that, taking some of that apart and explaining to people what is actually in the vaccines might be very helpful as well.
You used the word earlier, Catherine, optimistic. You're optimistic, which is terrific because we are, I feel like, at a moment of sorts here. We already referenced Robert Kennedy Jr., etc. Are you optimistic that we can sort of turn this ship around? I mean, I grew up in a world where it was just it was automatic, right? We all, as kids, we were vaccinated against measles, mumps, rubella. Those flu shots came into our school every year. Like there wasn't even a second thought given, and hence measles gets eliminated, for one example. Are you optimistic that we can maybe return to something similar to that, vaccinated communities?
I am optimistic that we can return to that. I mean, if you look at the data, there was a sort of a slowdown in vaccinations because of the disruptions that we saw to our healthcare system as a result of COVID-19. But I think, the vast majority of Canadians are still on board with vaccination. So we do need to work carefully with that, sort of growing population of people who are hesitant or utterly refuse to vaccinate. But it is a small proportion of Canadians, and I do like to think that, as Canadians, we like to look out for each other, right? And I do think we can take advantage of that and turn this around.
Catherine, I really appreciate your time on the show today. Thank you very much for being here.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
Catherine Carstairs is a professor in the Department of History at the University of Guelph and reminds us that vaccine hesitancy, and I use that characterization deliberately because I'm old enough to remember 2020 through 2022, maybe 2023. I'm old enough to remember pandemic times. And anti-vax was, if not used as, certainly considered a slur by those who were vaccine hesitant, for those who did not wish to be vaccinated against COVID-19. And I don't want to relitigate all of that. It was a pretty rough time, to say the very least. But Catherine can trace back many decades now, this vaccine hesitancy, and how, certainly, since COVID, it has increased, dare I say, exponentially. At minimum, there has been a whole lot more conversation about the safety and or efficacy of the various vaccines that we use. And in some cases, in the case of measles, for example, long used. And imagine living in a developed country such as this and losing our measles-free status. It's a pretty remarkable thing when you stop to think about it. And yet, here we are. I heard another commentator just the other day talking about this, and she was pulling no punches whatsoever. Very upset at this new status of ours, losing our measles-free status, and said bluntly, there should be zero exemption other than taking the vaccine will somehow harm you physically. Some health-related reason should be the only reason that one is able to abstain from a vaccine, which to my ears sounded like a direct shot across the bow of our Mennonite communities, as one example, on religious exemptions, right? And there has been a whole lot of reporting done as we investigated these 5,000 cases of measles through 9 provinces and 1 territory in the past 12 months or so. And some of those stories were centered here in southwestern Ontario. And the communities that simply did not believe in vaccines based on religious exemptions. That's what this other commentator's language sounded like to me. Unless there is medically documented evidence or reasons for an exemption, there should be no exemption. So forget your fear of needles and forget your faith-based exemption. There should be none. Again, when I heard it, it sounded to me like it was a direct shot at our Mennonite communities. Nonetheless, I wonder where you are at today, knowing that after more than 25 years, we are now no longer in this country measles free. The one thing that certainly stands out to me, and Catherine alluded to this in our conversation, what stands out to me is whether we feel as though we are at any sort of risk or we have any sort of compromised immunity that would make us at greater risk. I do wonder how much we think about those in our community who are at greater risk. Again, when you look at the reporting and the young children that have been affected by measles because we no longer have that collective immunity. What did the kids ever do to deserve this, to warrant this? And do we think about that as a community? I wonder. And I wonder what you think of Canada no longer having a measles-free status. Let me know your thoughts. We'll take your calls after this on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
People who are choosing not to, vaccinate their children. And I think, the increase in the number of people who've been concerned about vaccines, obviously escalated during the COVID-19 pandemic, but we've seen a growing anti-vax movement in Ontario and in Canada more broadly since the 1980s.
Catherine Carstairs is a professor in the Department of History at the University of Guelph. I think we understand that there has been a growing movement towards, I will use again, vaccine hesitancy, which is a softer term. And I understand those who may be vaccine hesitant taking some level of offense or umbrage with the description of being anti-vaccine. But nonetheless, and look, again, going back, not that I want to relitigate COVID, but many would say, I'm not anti-vaccine, I'm anti this vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine. It has trickled beyond that, clearly, because there's only one way to lose our measles-free status, and that is by having vaccination rates drop significantly enough that we no longer have that measles-free status here in Canada. Your thoughts on the newfound, old, I guess, status. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. We'll start with our good friend Dave in Cambridge, Farwell's Force member number 47. Good morning, Dave.
Morning, Mike. Two very quick points. Obviously, I'm speaking a little bit before your time, but 2 quick points. Number one, in the old days, there was no freedom of choice. when you were a child. You were obligated to get vaccinated. The second solid point was in those days, during the first week of registration in September, you were obligated as a child to bring to the school when you went to register, to bring your yellow vaccination record to the school to show you were vaccinated for all the applicable things. Have a great day, Mike.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. I remember those yellow vaccination forms, records as well. And I would submit to you that as children, we never had that freedom of choice that Dave alludes to. It was up to our parents, and they followed along and took the advice of public health. And here we are. Well, here we were by 1998, achieving that status as being measles free. And here we are in 2025, no longer having that status because parents are increasingly making different choices. It's as simple as that. And listen, we'd be fools. We would be utter fools to not understand the role that social media and or the World Wide Web played in all of this, right? Because suddenly there is a much easier way of disseminating information, all kinds of information, and certainly through the use of social media and other online gathering places like that, you can find many people. Find that echo chamber of people that feel exactly the same as you do, therefore validating your stance on something. Pretty easy to do these days. Andre, good morning.
Morning, Mike. Happy Wednesday.
You too.
Great segment. That's pretty much when I started watching your show in 2019 because I wanted to know about more what was going on in this crazy world. So great segment. I have to agree that back in the days, I did get my vaccination. Of course, it was normal. Now, Mike, I really like what you said and about what the professor said, the history professor. I would say I'm vaccine free because I'm in the middle. Okay, there's too far left and there's too far right, and now I'm listening on your show and other shows to try to understand more what's happening. I could do it, I could take it, and to me, it's great knowledge. But the thing is, if they take the COVID vaccine out and choose for people to do it, I would get the measles and stuff like that because I did it in my days, and it's safe. But because of that one that's in it, that people don't trust, it's not the science. Science is a fact. It's the government that whatever happened in the past, this is why there's too many hesitation. But I am in the middle, and hopefully they can do something a little bit better so that we can make Canada once again. Measles
free is what you're getting at. I'm not sure I followed every step along the path there with Andre, but as our guest from the University of Guelph said, this is going to be a tremendous undertaking, not inexpensive, to, I guess, promote better or help people better understand the effectiveness of the vaccines that we have long been using against measles in this case, by way of example. It's a long road ahead, but it didn't seem to take us all that long to lose that status as being measles free. We've got an update on the way from the 570 News Center, and then we check in minding Ottawa's business with our friends at the Blacklocks Reporter coming up on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Every Wednesday morning at this time, we check in with our friends at the Blacklocks Reporter, the only reporter-owned and operated newsroom covering our nation's capital. The managing editor there is Tom Korski, who joins us for these weekly chats. Tom, good morning.
Morning, Mike.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this one because I'm pretty sure I didn't know that Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada had a marketing department. Am I reading between the lines correctly here?
Isn't that something? That's literally their job title. They do have a marketing division, and they call themselves marketers of immigration. I know.
It's great work if you can get it, Tom.
It is.
Yeah.
It does sound like an interesting job, but they get into trouble sometimes because, on account of the weird juxtaposition of marketing and immigration. And indeed, they did in one case. They famously, in October, posted social media message announcing to foreigners and prospective immigrants, learn about healthcare in Canada. It said, thinking about moving to Canada? Did you know Canada has public health care? And it went on to extol the virtues of public health insurance. Interestingly, we see through access to information, Mike, they were sensitive about using the word free, not for the sake of immigrants, but I think for the sake of John Q. Sucker, taxpayer, who hears the billboard on taxpayer-funded health insurance for people who don't have a family doctor. They get a little hot. They get hot.
It is not free. I know that this comes off my taxes every year.
Oh, and how? By the way, one thing you do pay for is a program of some controversy. Wound up going to federal court a few years back, the Interim Federal Health Program, which pays for dental care, prescription drugs, and health care for illegal immigrants and refugee claimants, not landed immigrants, but the other ones, Interim Federal Health Program. Stephen Harper tried to cut it, went to federal judge who said that's cruel and unusual and ordered it reinstated. That will cost you. We just see this budget figure just tabled, $598 million this year, over $500 million. That's real money.
John Q. Sucker, taxpayer, is a generous taxpayer.
He does give and give and give, doesn't he?
Okay, I don't mean to pick on Employment and Social Development Canada, but a couple of stories at blacklocks.ca have caught my attention from that particular department. Let's start off with the student loans being written off to the tune of how much?
$197 million this year. And that's the last stop. The write-offs is when occurs, everyone knows, when Canada Revenue Agency and the Department of Social Development that runs the Canada Student Loan Program says we're not getting a dime. You can't get blood from a stone. $197 million this year. But, Mike, nearly $3 billion is at Canada Revenue for collections. This is money that presumably would be deducted from any benefit that goes to delinquent borrowers. Almost $3 billion. It's a lot of money.
So you mean all those years ago, Tom, when I had my Ontario Student Assistance Program and I borrowed money and spent it on things that were not related to my education, I could have just not paid it back?
Well, isn't that interesting? You paid interest. Parliament waived that. No interest is no longer required. It's an interest-free loan, which is, where do you get that in life, in the world? And the repayment terms are quite generous. And for all of that, they have said, Auditor General has said this, you watch for defaults and write-downs to go up and up and up. And that is because there's a lot of borrowers. And the famous case of a Superior Court judge in Newfoundland who was faced with a bankruptcy claim by a former student who had a Master's of Arts from the University of Prince Edward Island. Typically, you can't use bankruptcy law to get out from under a crown debt. But he let her because he said her degree was worthless. How's that for an attaboy on graduation day? Yeah.
Well done those past several years at school. Good job. The other thing from Employment and Social Development that has raised my eyebrow is the idea that we will create a real-time payroll data collection on some 21 million Canadian workers. The Phoenix pay system keeps coming up for me here, Tom, and it worries me.
It is absolutely tragic. Every time a government official walks into a room wearing a lab coat and a clipboard and saying, we want to upgrade your software, like everyone should tremble. Exactly. What is this? Anyone who runs payroll, doesn't matter, it could be the smallest of small businesses, is constantly remitting this data back to Canada Revenue. This is for purposes of Canada Pension Plan, employment insurance premiums, and tax checkoffs. And they came up with this neat idea. They said, well, why all this paper? Why don't we have all those employers for 21 million workers right across the country submit it electronically into one big computer. Wouldn't that be great? What does the National Payroll Institute say? They actually did a report on this, and they said, I'll just quote them. I don't want to characterize it. They said, number one, this is the most sensitive of information on just about everybody in the workforce, how much you make, your medical deductions, everything about you. And the second point was, as they put it, the scope and scale is massive. It would impact every single employer and every worker in Canada, Mike, in the trembling hands of the same government that couldn't run a passport office. Oh, fear the future, absolutely.
There's nothing to worry about here, Tom.
No,
nothing to worry about here.
Fine. It'll be fine.
Okay, one more I want to touch on before I let you go, because at Blacklocks, you have created a terrific reporter-owned and operated newsroom, works on a subscription model at blacklocks.ca, and yet our federal government heard this week that newspaper revenues have begun or continued perhaps to crater despite the subsidies that we have paid to it. And the newspaper industry says it can't change its model, Tom?
Isn't that something? Speaking of the taxpayers' woe, it is snowballing. The losses are snowballing in newspapers. These are StatsCan figures. The losses are absolutely staggering. So revenue's down a quarter since 2020. What happened in 2020? Well, they got a $500 million bailout. By the way, what's the bailout for newspapers? What small business in Canada would not like $30,000 a year per employee rebate? That's how generous the bailout is. And what did their chief lobbyist tell a committee? This was Paul Deegan, Chief Executive Officer of News Media Canada. He said, you may ask, why don't we change our business model? And he said he can't. We need to keep publishing on newsprint so we can get the ads from the Chevy dealers to support our journalism. We're powerless. We can't. Mike, this is like me saying, I can't sell my buggy whips, so I need you to keep subsidizing me in perpetuity. Any questions? Anyway, where do I fill out the grant application? This is an expensive failure.
Indeed, it is. As always, Tom, appreciate the conversations. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mike.
Tom Korski, managing editor at the Blacklocks Reporter, the only reporter-owned and operated newsroom covering our nation's capital. Learn more, read more, get your own subscription at blacklocks.ca. The model works. It works very well because of the quality content Tom and his colleagues are putting out. Tom joins us every Wednesday morning at 10 here on the Mike Farwell Show as we mind Ottawa's business together. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, the living wage in Ontario is going up. What data led to this decision? And is minimum wage ever going to keep up with living wage? We talk about it next on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Something that I hope you heard from the 570 News Center yesterday as we were in the midst of our show, and that is the increase for 2025 to Ontario's living wage. The calculations show an average living wage increase of just over 5% here in the region of Waterloo. It's increasing 8% to $23 per hour. Craig Pickthorne joins us on the show this morning. Craig is the Director of Communications with Ontario's Living Wage Network. Craig, thank you for the time. Good morning.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning to you.
Let's start with living wage itself, if we could. What is a living wage versus, for example, a minimum wage that we might be more familiar with?
Sure. So living wage is actually a calculation that happens every year over the summer. We look at all the expenses that a worker would have to cover. Obviously, the largest of those expenses everywhere we look in all the 10 regions is shelter cost. Then we also take into account transportation, food, childcare, even high-speed internet access and non-OHIP medical costs. Once we add all that up, we are able to generate a wage that a worker must earn in order to make ends meet where they live. And in the Waterloo region, that is $23 even. And that's short, obviously, by $5.40 from the minimum wage, even after the increase on October 1st.
What went into determining the 2025 calculations that you have just released?
Well, the increase is accounted by mostly by shelter costs. I mean, the shelter cost is the largest piece of any living wage rate. And so when it goes up by 8%, as it did in Waterloo Region this year, it's mostly due to shelter costs, and that's what went into that. What is, I guess, the right way to put it, I would think, Craig, the ultimate goal here of the Ontario Living Wage Network, would it be, because I know that living wage employers get celebrated, they get a little badge that proclaims them as living wage employers, so they're paying above the minimum wage, they're paying this living wage at now, as you've calculated for Waterloo Region, $23 an hour. Would the hope be that this is an idea that spreads, I suppose, to more and more employers? Yes, absolutely. I mean, even when you have large anchor employers like the city of Waterloo becoming certified, hundreds and hundreds of workers got a raise on the spot because of that certification decision. What that means is you have a lot more people that are not having to work several jobs, or they're not having to, make decisions about what they're going to pay for this week. Because if you work a minimum wage job, say in Waterloo Region, the difference that you're short a week is $189 per week. And there's actually no place in the province where you can work a minimum wage job and be able to pay all your bills.
How do you advocate? How do you reach employers to encourage them to participate in the living wage program?
Well, Mike, we actually don't do a whole lot of that work. The recruitment happens from peers, from employers talking to other employers, and from example, people see the badge or the mark of a certified living wage employer, or they hear about us and they reach out. We do some outreach ourselves, but mostly the best recruiters are other employers, because they're the ones that can talk about the benefits of, for example, they talk about lower turnover, lower recruitment and training costs, better morale, better standing in the community. And they speak best about that, not just, some guy in Ottawa that helps to run the network, when they hear about it from actual employers.
What inspired you to get involved to the level that you have, Craig?
I guess I thought it was a really simple, clear idea. You can just say living wage to people, and even if they've never heard of the network or certified employers, you kind of intuitively know what it's about. So to me, it was a really elegant solution to working poverty. It's not the only one. It's just one tool of many, and I like its simplicity.
For those who are certified living wage employers today, when your annual increase is calculated, do those employers automatically top up to the new wage, or is that a conversation that they have to have internally?
There's a contract that exists between us and every employer, and in that license agreement, it states that they have 6 months to raise to meet the new living wage rate. But frankly, most of them already know. Well, they all know about the living wage going up over the course of the summer. We give them a heads up about what it's going to go up to, and they plan accordingly. So most employers are able to just bump up the wages on the spot. Some, however, have to wait for contracts to come up for negotiation, et cetera, so that there's that 6-month buffer in there.
Do you know offhand how many employers are connected to the Ontario Living Wage Network today?
649.
That's a very specific number. You absolutely had that number handy, didn't you?
I did, yeah. And there's many more workplaces as well, because, like, for example, Libro Credit Union has several branches, as does Meridian Credit Union. So it's really 843 workplaces across the province.
Craig, I appreciate your time on the show today and your advocacy on the issue. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mike. See you again.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Craig Pickthorne is the Director of Communications with the Ontario Living Wage Network. Its calculation for 2025 shows an average living wage increase of 5.3%. Here in the region of Waterloo, the increase 8%, up $1.70 to $23 per hour. That is the amount one would need to earn in this region so their basic needs are met and they can more fully participate in our community. Mike is on the phone with us this morning. Point Clark Mike, Farwell's Force member number 37. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Mike. I do some volunteer work with food banks and such up here in this area. And $23 an hour, when you compare it to the rents in Kitchener-Waterloo, you know, some people are paying as many as $20,000 in after-tax income just for rent and shelter. So $23 is roughly $46,000 to $48,000 a year. And if you're paying $20,000 a year in shelter costs, I don't know how they calculate that as a living wage, because many of the people that I come into contact through my volunteer work said they can barely afford the utilities and the shelter costs, the rent or whatever, because they have to go to food banks and stuff like that to help to get so they can eat. So I'm wondering if you could get a more detailed breakdown of what they were assuming as far as rent and stuff like that, because I know a lot of people need some help out there, Mike, and it kind of $23 an hour for is that for a single person, family of four? What's that for?
That would absolutely be an individual.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how that person's doing it, because we've got a lot of seniors only collecting old age and Canada pension, right? And they are scraping by, Mike, and it's very concerning to me that our citizens in this wealthy country can't live, because a lot of the stuff after you're taxed and stuff like that, if you're paying $20,000 a year in rent, I don't know how you can afford it. Those are my thoughts, Mike.
All right, Mike. Appreciate the thoughts as always. So I'm just doing the quick math here. You're looking at about $1,700 a month in rent, if that is amounting to the $20,000 a year that Mike suggests for shelter. So $1,700 for a one-bedroom apartment. We might be able to do better than that. If you want a more fulsome breakdown of how they arrive at these numbers, OntarioLivingWage.ca is the website that you can visit, and they go into much greater detail with all kinds of nice charts and whatnot. OntarioLivingWage.ca. The bottom line is, even as calculated, the living wage here in the region of Waterloo, just to keep it local, is almost $6 more than what is being paid in the way of minimum wage. Not every employer is a living wage employer. And I admit to struggling a little bit with municipalities being the living wage employers, because while that's lovely and they have folks who they can maintain better morale and reduce turnover, those living wage salaries or rates are being paid by other people in the community who might not be earning a living wage. I find that to be a little bit paradoxical. But to get right to Mike's point, I think what we're talking about here is the imperfection of capitalism, aren't we? Because we know many people working in minimum wage jobs for large retailers. I'm thinking big box stores, I'm thinking grocery stores, etc., that turn around incredible profits on the backs of those minimum wage earners. Is there a little bit more flexibility within the level of those profits and the rates being paid to the people who help ensure those profits? I'm not going to dance too far down the road of another ism here, but I think it's a conversation worth having. This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Just in case the snow that is still lingering on the ground out there is not enough of a reminder, we are awfully close, aren't we? to that time of year, just over 3 weeks from now, we will be well into a week into the month of December. And when December rolls around, all things festive begin. We turn our minds to the holidays, and that's what our friends at the Noteworthy Singers are doing as well, as they prepare for their annual Christmas Joy concert with a very important charitable twist attached to it. Pat Clausen is a member of the Noteworthy Singers and joins us for a conversation this morning. Pat, it's always great to talk to you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. It's great to talk to you, too. Thanks so much for having us on the air again this morning.
I am always happy to do that. I absolutely love what you and the choir do. And maybe for those who don't know the choir as well as I do, can you give us a little background on the Noteworthy Singers?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. The Noteworthy Singers are a local community choir for people over the age of 55 who love to sing. And we've been a part of the community for many years, initially as the Merry Melodies many years ago, but we have been the Noteworthy Singers since 2012.
This must, Pat, offer a great sense of community to you and your fellow choir members.
It certainly does. We all love to sing, and over the years, we really have become a little bit of a family, and part of what we love to do is contribute to the community. And we do that through some singing that we do at local retirement homes. But one of our biggest joys of the choir year is our Christmas concert, which is quickly approaching. We support a charity which is near and dear to our hearts that we think is very, very important. And being with you this morning and talking to you, having the chance to talk about our concert as well as the charity that we support is really what I want to emphasize with the listeners this morning.
Let's talk a little more about that charity. It's the New Toys for Needy Kids campaign, which is run annually out of the Knights of Columbus in Waterloo. Can you tell us more about the campaign?
Yes, the Waterloo Knights of Columbus has been organizing the New Toys for Needy Kids campaign for over 25 years. And what they do is they distribute toys to children in our community, not just at Christmas time, but also as the need arises, more and more for birthdays throughout the year. They support children who have extended stays in hospital. And I just can't emphasize enough how much the New Toys for Needy Kids campaign and the Waterloo Knights of Columbus have contributed to this project. The Noteworthy Singers have been proud supporters of this project for the past 13 years. So this year, we will be supporting them for the 14th year. And we're really proud of the fact that during that time, we have raised as a choir getting close to $100,000 in support of that campaign. And it was from very humble beginnings. I think the first year that we partnered with New Toys for Needy Kids, we raised just over $600. And that amount has grown steadily over the years due to the incredible generosity of the region of Waterloo and the extended community.
That is an absolutely incredible number, Pat. $600 in year one, and in 12 years since, almost $100,000.
Yeah, and I mean, as we all know, even though we live in a very affluent community, it's not hard to see the increasing need that is around us. And as a choir, we just really feel that this is I don't want to say an easy way, but a relatively easy way for us to support this project. And we do it because all proceeds, all the monies raised at our upcoming Christmas concerts will go directly in support of New Toys for Needy Kids. This is not a fundraising concert for the choir. This money that we raise, that hopefully our audience will help us raise, will go directly into support for New Toys for Needy Kids.
How did that relationship first begin, Pat, between Noteworthy Singers and New Toys for Needy Kids?
Well, we practice at the Waterloo Knights of Columbus Hall. They've been very generous in helping us. And so it's partly in a response to that. But I think many members of our choir are grandparents. We may come from professions where we've worked with kids. We see the need in our community, and we all want to try to give back in some way, shape, or form if we can.
I think it's incredible. I love that. And my old friend Marty up there at the Waterloo Knights he's a passionate force out there in our community, and I know what this campaign means to him every year. So
Marty works incredibly hard to make this all happen.
yeah, he really does. Okay, so let's talk about the concert itself then. Christmas Joy, which is coming up on Sunday, December the 7th. And this is the way that we as a community can not only help you raise this money for new toys for needy kids, but we're going to have an afternoon full of beautiful music. Tell us more about the Christmas Joy concert, please.
Okay, I'm happy to talk about the music that we will be singing. But one thing I do want to emphasize, many of your listeners may have come to hear us in the past, and I'm sure they've enjoyed it. We hope they come back again. However, there is one fairly major change to how we are doing things this year. Last year, our concert was very, very popular. It was standing room only. And while this was wonderful and did help to raise a lot of money for New Toys for Needy Kids, having to stand at a concert or be in an overflow room was not a very pleasant experience for some of our concert goers. And we want people who come to hear us sing to enjoy themselves. And so this year, we had a lot of consultation over this and a lot of discussion about this, but we have decided that this year we will be selling tickets for the concert. In past years, the concert has been open and it's been by free will donation and offering, which has worked extremely well. It's worked extremely well. But as I say, we do want people to have a place to sit when they come and hear us sing. So we are selling tickets this year. And the tickets, of course, are limited to the number of spots that we have. And in consultation with the Knights, we feel that we can raise just as much money for them, and they may be able to stretch our dollars a little bit further because some of the arrangements that they have with companies to purchase toys. So in order to come to our concert on Sunday, December 7th at 3 o'clock at Knox in Waterloo, you need to have a ticket. If there are still tickets available, we will sell them at the door, but they are selling quickly. And I would say if you want to come and hear us sing, please try to get a ticket.
What's the best way for us to do that, Pat?
Well, if you know someone in the choir, talk to them and they will get a ticket for you. If you don't know anyone in the choir and you would like to come and hear us sing, there are two ways. One is to call a phone number, which is 519-886-9927. And if you call that number and order a ticket, we will make sure that you have that ticket in your hand the day of the concert. We also will post updates as to availability of tickets on a web or through an email address. And that email address is info, I-N-F-O, at nwsingers.com.
All of this information is available on the Noteworthy Singers website as well. That address that Pat just mentioned, NW for Noteworthy, nwsingers.com. Again, the email address, info at nwsingers.com. The phone number, 519-886-9927. What songs will we be enjoying at the concert this year, Pat?
One of the fun things about the Christmas concert is that much of the music that we sing is familiar. So you will hear a combination of secular and sacred music. Much of it you will know the words to. The arrangements might be a little bit different. We also provide opportunity for our audience to sing along a little bit with us at Christmas time, and that's always fun, even for people who think that they can't sing or aren't singers. I think most of us are capable of belting out a few Christmas tunes. And we also are delighted that we will be welcoming some guest musicians and a guest soloist to our concert as well. We have fabulous music direction. Our director is Terry English. She is a retired music teacher. She does a great job of choosing music that the audience enjoys and music that is appropriate for us to sing. And we have a wonderful pianist who adds a lot of spice and a little bit of youth to our concert. So I think it's fair for me to say that if you come to our Christmas concert, you'll have a lot of fun, and it will certainly get you into the spirit of Christmas, along with the fact that you are supporting what I feel and what the choir feels is a very, very important charity that provides a great service to our community.
about 3.5 weeks away at this point.
That's right.
How's the choir feeling, Pat?
We're feeling good. We're practicing hard. We had a great rehearsal the other day. As a choir member, I sometimes experience some sort of momentary panic, but it dissipates, and we always pull it together, and I feel do a good job. And I think partly that's because those of us who are in the choir enjoy singing, we enjoy being together, and I think that the title of our concert, Christmas Joy, is really appropriate because what we're trying to do is spread some Christmas joy. Thinking about Christmas is a pleasant thing to do. It takes us away from the snow and the cold weather, and we think about spreading that joy of Christmas that is so special to all of us.
Having been in the audience for past performances from the Noteworthy Singers, I know the treat that we're all in for on December the 7th. So thanks to you and your fellow choir members, Pat, for all of this great work over the years in support of new toys for needy kids. And we're looking forward to the concert on December the 7th. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Mike, for having us. As a choir, we so much appreciate the support that you've given us over the years, and as well as the audience of people who listen to you. I think we've managed to attract many spectators to our concert. We hope that continues, and we hope that those who come to hear us sing not only enjoy the music, but enjoy the fact that they are giving back to the community, which is just so important. Not just at Christmas time, but all year. No question. And we certainly get a lot in return when we hear one of your performances. So thank you again, and we're looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Mike, for having me. And I hope that you have a Merry Christmas as well. You also, Pat. We'll talk again, okay? I hope so. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye. Pat Clausen, one of the members of the Noteworthy Singers, their annual Christmas Joy concert in support of new toys for needy kids. This is the 14th year they've been supporting new toys for needy kids with their annual holiday concert. Almost $100,000 raised to date. Incredible. This is all taking place on Sunday, the 7th of December at Knox Presbyterian Church on Herb Street in Uptown Waterloo. And you can get all the information you need because you need a ticket this time around. We want to make sure everybody gets a seat and is comfortable for this beautiful show starting at 3 p.m. on Sunday, December the 7th. Visit nwsingers.com for more information. This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. A week from tomorrow at the Apollo Cinema in downtown Kitchener, one of my favorite local movie houses, you will be able to take part in the 4th annual Impact Film Festival. Here to talk more about it, Mats Van Cleef, Director of Operational Strategy with Enviro Stewards. Good morning, Mats.
Good morning, Mike. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. What is the Impact Film Festival?
The Impact Film Festival is an annual event that we put on at the Apollo Cinema to showcase organizations doing good work around the world. We select 7 or 8 short films that are about 5 to 7 minutes in length to showcase some of the good that people do to inspire others and to see where people might be able to get involved, and also to share our own work with the Safe Water Social Ventures, where we provide safe drinking water for those most in need in East Africa.
Can we talk a little bit more about that, this Safe Water Drinking Ventures and Enviro Stewards and how this all began for you?
Yeah, so Bruce Taylor founded Enviro Stewards 25 years ago in 2000 with a real intention to use business as a force for good, as a founding Canadian B Corp and a living wage employer like one of your prior guests. We really care about the work that we do in addition to having an impact. And 5 years into founding Enviro Stewards, he wanted to also use some of the profit for having a greater impact in the places where it's needed the most. So the Safe Water Social Ventures was an opportunity to impact those in South Sudan originally, now also in Uganda and in the Congo, to provide safe drinking water to those people in rural areas that don't have access to safe drinking water in a way that is much more sustainable. It isn't creating dependence on Western culture. It's empowering them to support their own communities with household biosand filters.
along with the 7 to 8 short films that you mentioned that will be a part of the film festival next week, also a pretty incredible guest speaker will be a part of this.
Yes, yeah. We've been working for a while to get Lugoya Matthew, the founder of the project in Uganda, to come to Canada and to share some of his experiences. It's been a 3-year process to get his visa secured, because as you can imagine, he's actually a refugee from South Sudan in Uganda, and it was very challenging for him to be able to secure that visa. With support from Mike Morris, when he was MP and his advocacy, we were able to get a visa secured. And so he'll be our featured guest speaker at the event to share with the attendees what that experience has been like for him to provide the safe drinking water to the rural communities there.
What can we expect at the festival next Thursday night?
So we have a Champions Dinner that starts at 6 o'clock. So that's the only portion that's paid. It's an optional $25 fee for a great dinner that you can network over with other attendees, or you can join at 7 o'clock for the film festival itself. And we'll have some introductions from some of the film producers. There will be a live musical performance from Tuzi, and this interview with Lugoya Matthew and a chance to connect with him. And the types of films that we're showing tie into this work in some way or another. They're all organizations doing good around the world, some locally from our region, like the Community Garden at Petersburg, and local people doing good work on climate here in Waterloo region. Also a film on microfinance and tying that idea into this work with Safe Water Social Ventures to make it a more sustainable venture. A B Corp film that show kind of the power that business can have as a force for good. So a really wide selection that I'm sure attendees will be excited to just open their eyes to what's all happening around the world.
And you mentioned that Champions Gala, the $25 paid portion, so we can come to the film festival at 7 o'clock next Thursday night for free?
Exactly, yeah.
Why a film festival? What took you in this direction?
That's a great question. I'd have to check with Bruce as the founder of it. But it's really neat to be able to give people the experience of what we saw in Uganda. I got the opportunity to travel there 3 years ago, and collecting some film footage, it really makes it real for people to see it with their own eyes. The people that are impacted by the filters, not just that it's a number or a statistic on a screen, but that you actually see the people that are carrying the unsafe drinking water to their homes and how they're using the filter to then make it safe. And it's also a great opportunity to network, to bring in other organizations that are doing great work, and films are just an amazing way to showcase that. It is
a testament, and I agree, the film medium I'm a big fan of, but this filter is a testament to the kind of innovation and ingenuity that exists here in the region of Waterloo.
Yes, yeah. And we can't really take credit for this filter because it's ancient technology. It's been around for 200 years. It's available open source, and there's many organizations that distribute this. What we really pride ourselves in is the approach that we take in training the entrepreneurs there to develop capacity. And because it's so simple, because it's technology that's been around forever, it makes it very sustainable for the people there. They're not relying on pumps or other mechanical parts that you would need to import from another country. No plastics are involved that you might need to bring in from outside. It's all local materials, the cement, the sand. The entrepreneurs there can collect it all locally, source it locally, and use local labor. They employ 39 families through the work that they do, all locally, so they don't need our support to actually build these filters now that they have done a few. So because it's such simple technology, it's very sustainable.
It's incredible what we're able to do. And is there a place we can go, a website, anything like that, to learn more about the film festival, maybe get a ticket for that Champions Gala, et cetera?
Yes, yeah. We have some of our past films at swsv.org. SWSV stands for Safe Water Social Ventures. And I've shared the link on your socials as well, so people will be able to find it there. Sorry, I forgot the second question.
No, that was just wondering how we can find out more and maybe get a ticket for that gala
yes,
as well.
The registration's there as well.
Beautiful. So it's swsv.org. The Impact Film Festival, 4th annual, next Thursday night at the Apollo. Mats, keep up the great work. Thanks very much for being here.
Thanks for the opportunity to share with the listeners, Mike.
Mats Van Cleef joining us, Director of Operational Strategy with Enviro Stewards here on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I think it would be fair to say our next guest has done it all politically. City councillor, member of parliament, a cabinet minister, and an ambassador as well. He has put all of this into a book entitled Pursuing a Public Life, How to Succeed in the Political Arena. And he is in the region today to hold a lecture a little later on. But we get the opportunity to speak with the Honourable Sergio Marchi this morning. Mr. Marchi, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. Thank you for having me.
It is an absolute pleasure, sir, and thank you very much for making the time. I'm curious right off the hop about the title of the book and how to succeed in the political arena. Why did you decide to take all of your experiences and put them into a form like this?
The reason behind writing a book is my deep concern that even though politics seems to have become more divisive and nasty, all too many Canadians, especially young Canadians, are giving public life a pass. And as far as AI, which everybody is singing the praises of, AI will never run a country, will never give empathy, and will never safeguard our values. So we need good, dedicated, committed people to take the mantle of political leadership. And I was concerned that just too many people are taking a pass. So the book is first and foremost a call to public service. And secondly, it's a how-to book for youngsters, what steps to follow from nominations to campaigning to governing. And I said to myself, if my experience can lend some lessons and encourage some people to run, then it will have been worth writing for sure.
What lessons did you take away from your time as a public figure?
Well, there are so many. In fact, I think I have too many. I mentioned to the publisher in the manuscript when I gave it to her that there's 78. I said, should I lessen them? But there's so many different lessons, in terms of the campaigning. The most important part is obviously getting enough volunteers. And after that, it's canvassing, reaching out to Canadians. And a lot of political candidates don't like canvassing. They prefer to spend time in the office. But I think the place of a candidate is not in the office. It's meeting voters. It's talking to voters. So, that's one core lesson from what is important in campaigns. It's even the lessons of how to select staff for two very different offices. One is a constituency office, which serves the public. The other office is Ottawa, where it serves the MP for his or her parliamentary obligations. And there are two different offices requiring two different skill sets, and you need to do the due diligence in getting the right people because they're going to reflect on whether people respect and like you as a member of parliament or not. So there's many lessons along the way, and I wrote them all down so that, again, it could be easy for the reader to take notes, and if they're interested, perhaps follow that to success.
What would you say, sir, are the benefits that you took away from your time in office?
That's a great question because for all the negatives that we know about politics, there's a great satisfaction in serving in public life. I think the greatest satisfaction is just serving your voters. If you think about it, voters give you their vote to help run their country. So they're giving you a huge obligation, but there's many, many points of satisfaction. Winning a campaign, winning an election is such a high emotional feeling. Standing in the House of Commons for the first time, giving a speech is a thrill. Being asked to serve in cabinet is unbelievable in terms of the opportunities that are handed to you. Meeting Canadians from one side of the country to the other, working with fascinating people. There are so many upsides, and it's those upsides that make up for the downers in politics, because politics is not an easy business or career. But for every time that you fall, there are many points that allow you to get back and keep going. So there's lots of satisfaction if you decide to enter the political arena.
I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that it could be said you've done it all, from city councillor to member of parliament to cabinet minister to ambassador. What was it, though, initially that inspired you to public life?
The thing that inspired me was my community activism. In late high school and throughout my entire university time, I was very, very heavily involved in the community. I ran a ratepayers association. I was president of a youth club. And I was also editor of a community newspaper, among other things. And I had such a thrill in changing the world in our small corner of the world and fighting City Hall. My parents couldn't stand it because they didn't want to encourage me to do that, because it was conflicting with my studies. And for Italian immigrants, education is close to the top. So they thought I was unhinged to do all that work and let my school suffer. And secondly, they couldn't understand why I was doing it on a voluntary basis. They used to tell me, if you're going to take your time away from school, at least get paid for it. But I couldn't explain to them how satisfied I was at being a volunteer. And it was that experience, Mike, that led to politics, because I studied to be an urban planner. I graduated. But when I graduated, I said, you know what? I love the community work much more than the planning, even though I liked it at the time. And I said, I'd like to pursue something similar. And that something similar turned out to be politics. And I ran a campaign in Sault Ste. Marie. We won. The MP's name was Ron Irwin, and then he invited me down to Parliament Hill to be his executive assistant, and it took off from there. It's for an Italian immigrant, the son of an Italian immigrant. I've had the opportunity of living a dream.
First of all, Sault Ste. Marie, gosh, do I love that community. Absolutely adore it. And you just made me think of something when you talked about that first campaign and winning. I spoke with someone many, many years ago when I was considering taking a run at office. And she said to me words I've never forgotten. She said, there's two questions you have to ask yourself going into a campaign. What happens if I lose, which I had thought about because the idea of running and losing terrified me. What happens if you win? And that I had never considered. And that actually scared me even more, Mr. Markey.
I was going to say that's more terrifying.
It is. Did you have any idea going into that first campaign? Were you weighing those questions at all?
Yeah, I was. And my first campaign was for city councillor. And I left Parliament Hill as a staffer to actually do my master's in planning. I thought it would be a good insurance policy to have. And instead, I went to a meeting called from some friends, and they wanted me to run for councillor because the incumbent was no longer running again. And as you know, incumbency at the municipal level is so helpful to being reelected. And so it was an open field. And I threw my hat in and I said, well, if I lose, I'm still young enough and I'll go to school and run later. If I win, then what? But I managed to win, and I loved my 2 years at the municipal level because, first of all, there's no better level of government to get to know your community than the local one. And secondly, you're there 24/7 helping people. And thirdly, you live or die by your own intuition. There's no political parties at the municipal level in Ontario, as you know. And you have a vote, just like the mayor. I mean, mayors are first among equals, but everybody has a single vote. So the power of an individual councillor and the ability to be independent is a huge, huge level of satisfaction compared to party politics, where sometimes you have to hold your nose because you don't agree with the party position, or other times you're compelled to do something else because of the party's platform. But you run as a on the party label, so you have to also be able to accept those. But the municipal level does not have to be, as I say in the book, a stepping stone to provincial or federal life. It can be a wonderful career on its own and very satisfying. So if people are more akin to not leaving their community and serving locally, then municipal is their ticket.
You mentioned at the outset the challenges that we see in public life these days, the challenges that we see in governments, municipal, provincial, federal, the division, the polarization that exists today, which is clearly much different from when you first ran and probably when you exited. How would you say, Mr. Marquis, that we got here?
Yeah, you're right. I don't want to glorify the times that I was in public life, but it was a different era. MPs of different parties got along. Opposition members would speak to ministers and vice versa. And today, as you said, the polarization keeps our people apart. And the context of the book is that public cynicism has gone through the roof, right? People don't like the negative politics. They don't like their politicians fighting each other. They want politicians to fight for them and for their country. Many think the politics is broken and that it's tough to get through to politicians in terms of their concerns and their priorities. So it's not a great moment for democracy, even though our democracy is a lot stronger and better than many, many other countries. Our democracy has become more fragile, and it's time to bring in a new political leadership. Today's generation has to step forward. I mean, when you look at Parliament today in the House of Commons, barely 3% of all the MPs are under 30. And that's not the face of Canada. We got to get our youngsters grabbing that baton, convincing their own generation, and then exciting and inspiring the rest of us to new heights.
It is a great message, and I'm so grateful for your time on the show today to talk about it. Mr. Marquis, thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you, Michael, and I also understand from Shockey that you're a prolific community leader and fundraiser, so I want to salute you. Even without your political title or not being elected, you do as much as those who are elected, so kudos to you as well.
Well, that's very kind of you, and tell Shockey the check is in the mail, okay?
Thank you very much, Mike, for your time.
Thank you, sir. Be well.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Sergio Marquis, former city councillor, member of parliament, cabinet minister, ambassador, in town today to give a lecture, part of a speaking tour following the publication of his book, Pursuing a Public Life, How to Succeed in the Political Arena. And yes, my dear friend, Shockey Fahel, always working behind the scenes to ensure that I have access to guests like the Honourable Sergio Marquis, because the message there, it does land, at least with me. And I think because you are a regular listener to this show, it lands with you as well. Politics is different. And I will be the first to admit that I have said on more than one occasion that I have very little interest, if any at all, in ever pursuing a life more public than this one. But it's my sense from what I have learned over the years working in a role like this, that getting things done is far more difficult than you would imagine before you pursued that public life. I have zero doubt, that almost everyone, if not everyone, enters the political arena at any level with the intention of accomplishing very good things for their community. I have zero doubt of that. The challenge becomes once you get there and you realize how things work or don't work, it becomes incredibly difficult, I think, to get those things done. But, you know, Mr. Marquis gives me something to think about here, insofar as if we don't get people energized to pursue a public life, to pursue elected office, well, we're in a whole deep pile of doo-doo, aren't we? AI is not going to run the country for us. We need people. We need people with ideas, with energy, with empathy to solve the big, hairy problems that we have before us today. I'm curious. The title of the book, Pursuing a Public Life, How to Succeed in the Political Arena. Would you ever consider a public life? We talk politics on this show all the time. We might be as cynical as they come when it comes to our discussions around politics. There are people behind the label that we assign them. Oh, that person is just a politician, or that person is a politician, and all that the title conveys to us. We don't always cast them in a favorable light. Would you be willing to step forward and become one of them? Put your name on a ballot? Would love to hear your thoughts. 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. Would you be inclined to pursue a public life? Let me know your thoughts on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
And secondly, it's a how-to book for youngsters, what steps to follow from nominations to campaigning to governing. And I said to myself, if my experience can lend some lessons and encourage some people to run, then it will have been worth writing for sure.
The Honorable Sergio Marquis, whose book, Pursuing a Public Life, How to Succeed in the Political Arena, has just been published. It's got a foreword by former Ontario Premier Bob Rae. Mr. Marquis was a city councillor, a member of parliament, a cabinet minister, an ambassador, and now he is encouraging others, particularly younger people, despite what we see and hear in politics today, to consider running for office, because a public life is a fulfilling one. In service of one's community at any level of government is fulfilling enough to pursue. So says the former councillor, MP, and cabinet minister. Would you ever consider, never say never, so the saying goes, would you consider a life in elected office? 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. Marino, Farwell's Force member number 66. Good morning.
How are you, Mike?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Good.
I've been a trustee in Guelph, Catholic School Board trustee for 36 years. I also got involved at the provincial level and the national level. Rewarding, absolutely. Frustrating, yeah. And I would do it again in a heartbeat. I think the school board trustee for me is the absolute grassroots level of politics. I've had opportunities to run for city council, to run as an MPP, and I turned them down because I really believed my position and my role was as a trustee. I believe in the Catholic education, and that's where I've stayed. But absolutely, I've done it, I love it, and I would do it again.
What inspired you to do it, Marino?
It was actually really interesting. Where I was living at the time, they were planning to build a school just up the street, and it kept being put off and put off. So one day, I went in to talk to the director of education, and I said, what's going on? And he said, well, it's being held up at the ministry. So I called the ministry, and the ministry says, well, we haven't even got site board plans yet, site plans for where the school is going to be. So I went back to the director, and I said, listen, I understand the holdups. Just tell me the truth when I ask. And at that point, I decided, you know what? I need to get involved here, and I did.
And you do it again in a heartbeat?
Absolutely. I'm continuing to do it, and I will continue to do it.
I admire you for that, Marino. Thanks very much for the call today.
Okay, Mike, have a good day.
You too. Take the very best of care. We've heard from Marino on this show before. I knew he was elected as a trustee in Guelph, Wellington, and there you go, would do it again in a heartbeat. And I will say again, as much as I have little to no interest in it, I do admire those who put their names forward, who canvass from door to door, who put their names on a ballot. Sometimes they win, sometimes they don't. It takes a ton of courage. And then once you're in office, oh my goodness gracious, you get jackwagons like me spouting off constantly about your pay increase, the bad decisions you make, you name it. Look, the scrutiny is necessary, and I think we all collectively on this show do a very good job of letting those who are elected know that we're paying attention. We don't make it personal. Absolutely, we disagree with the direction that they take sometimes. It frustrates the HE double hockey sticks out of us. But we maintain a level of civility that is critical in these times. And absolutely, when you get into office, you know, not everybody's going to agree. There will be criticisms. But we'll keep it civil, and we will keep working collectively, whether we're in office or we're contributing to a show like this. We'll keep contributing to a better place to live. That's what this is all about, after all. We've got an update on the way from the 570 News Center, and then a deeper dive into local politics. Political R&D with a guy who's been there, done that. And we're going to talk about the budget process in the townships and those councillors' salaries as we continue the Mike Farwell Show this morning. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. All right, he picks his own music and he shares with us his intimate knowledge of all things political. And today he decided taking care of business, BTO, is how we would start political R&D. The R for Rob, the D for Deutschman. Good morning.
Good morning. Listen, before we get started on in the taking care of business thing, when I get here early, I sit out in the hallway. And, I hear that your station is number one for traffic and weather. So some of the guys outside are saying that a certain someone has to pick up their socks because their shoulders are getting a little tired.
Listen, this station is number one because of guests like you, Rob Deutschman.
I think the news part has to pick it up a little bit. So,
all right, let's get into it. We've got a couple of things to talk about. We'll get into township budgets after 11:45.
I wonder if we should start with that.
You want to start with that
I
instead?
think we should start with
that.
that.
You throw the curveball at me now?
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry. I know. It's just because
so
I know you're a professional. So
we'll get into council. I just want our listeners to know where we're going.
Thing, because I happened to see in the Wilmot information, one of the items they talked about was actually compensation.
Okay,
for councillors.
So we will get to council compensation a little after 11:45. Let's dive into budget talk. And I need you to move your microphone a little bit more straight because when you move your head, we lose you a little bit. Okay?
How's that?
That's perfect.
I'll hunch my shoulders.
You don't have to hunch. You can lift it up if you want. Okay. Whatever you need, Rob Deutschman.
There we go. Okay.
Okay. I just want your dulcet tones to be heard clearly.
Face for radio.
That's right. Okay. Townships, budgets. How about Nathan Cadeau in Woolwich last week at the budget meeting saying we might have to declare insolvency?
I heard that. And
Me too.
Yeah, and I thought maybe you're going to play the tape again, but no, we've already heard it enough. Listen, I contacted you after I heard the Woolwich presentation, and I thought, wow, there's some really interesting conversations that were had around the horseshoe there. And then I had a chance to, first I saw the article about Wilmot, so I went online to take a look at the Wilmot presentation as well. And I think what's very interesting is you've got two similarly situated townships, right? They're about the same size, lots of development over the past decade. Always looked at from my perspective from North Dumfries as sort of the two townships that we always look to see what they're doing, get an idea on what we could do in our area. So very progressive and advanced. And now you're seeing two sort of similar problems in terms of their budget. Right, their need to increase budget because maybe reserves are low, debt might be high, capital infrastructure projects are looming on the horizon, and we don't have the money or the resources to deal with it, which is totally understandable. And you're seeing two sort of different approaches being taken with respect to that, and looming over all of that is the strong mayor power, which is new. And so what really caught my attention was I was watching the Woolwich, and I heard Councillor Cadeau mention the insolvency thing, and that really caught my attention. And I heard the comment from the delegation about the big boy, big girl pants. And I just want to say, when you are preparing a budget in the public domain, everything is public. All the conversations are public, and you're going to have a dialogue that's going to be wide-ranging from considering all the situations versus like when I run my business, my law practice, I'm deciding my budget. I don't have the press watching me or people or like yourself or the community coming into my office and looking over my shoulder and asking me questions or listening to how I'm developing my budget. I consider all the different options, what I'm going to do, and I do it privately. But when it's the people's business, you're doing it in the domain. And in the Woolwich situation, they were just saying, look, as a counselor, because when you're new to all of this, and anyone, this is for anyone, I don't care what your background is. You could be a lawyer forever, an accountant forever, a plumber forever, whatever you are. When you get into this situation, this is brand new budgeting, okay? You bring with you, maybe I budget for my household. Like anyone, as far as I'm concerned, can be a counselor with the assistance of staff to make these decisions. But you're going to have to go through a learning curve. And that learning curve happens in public. And so they were asking questions that they wanted to understand. Who makes this decision? How do we make that decision? Where do we get that information? And you're going to ask those questions. And sometimes some of the answers or some of the questions are going to sound like people are deferring responsibility. That's not what they're doing. They're trying to determine what their responsibility and what their role is. And to tell them, put on your big boy pants or big girl pants, that is someone from the private domain putting their perspective on a public process. And it's not that at all. And they did have their big boy and big girl pants on because they were having a public discussion about this in front of everyone.
But what about the fact, Rob, that if we're talking insolvency, that's suggesting that the township is on the verge of being broke?
Look, here's the other thing, and we'll talk about this because it ties in with this issue about, well, we've got to raise what we pay counselors because we want to, as you put in your article today, attract quality candidates, okay? So I took a look at I said, I'm going to look at the background of some of these people in Woolwich. And I just looked up Councillor Cadeau's background. He's got a great background. He's got a master's degree. He worked for 7 years in an Ontario ministry. I think it was maybe the Solicitor General's office. He's a professor at Conestoga College. So, when you're talking about quality candidates, these are people that understand what's going on. And when he asks a question, it's a fair question to ask because he wants to know. He's not, maybe he could ask this question privately because you can't ask a question privately. Like he could send an email to the director of finance and say, hey, are we in an insolvency situation here? So maybe there's a time and a place to ask those sorts of questions because that's fair to ask that question directly one-on-one because you can have a meeting with any of your directors one-on-one to get a better understanding of what's going on. But so he's raising this issue, fair issue to raise, fair question, and I forget what the answer was, but I don't think it was that they're in that situation.
Right. I don't think anybody said specifically we are in that situation, but both Wilmot and Woolwich have expressed the same issue. Historically, tax increases have not kept pace with infrastructure and other needs. Yeah. So what are these townships to do at this point?
Yeah, so I think one of the issues is how do you get to this situation? You got to know how you got to this situation, right? So just me looking from the outside in and thinking about the past, 10, 15 years ago when we were looking at, impressed with what was happening at Woolwich and Wilmot, it was because they had a lot of residential development going on. Tons of it. Baden, Breslau. I mean, they have major, and they still have major plans going on. But what's happening right now? Residential construction is slow. What does residential construction mean to a township or a municipality? It means assessment growth. And when you have rapid residential development, you have higher assessment growth, and that helps defray or lower your overall need to increase taxes because you're achieving property taxes through the assessment growth. And this happened in North Dumfries before I was there, about I'd say about 5-6 years before 2010. We had this long period of significant assessment growth, and we had like 14 years of zero property tax increases, which sounds great, but at some point, as prices escalate each year through inflation, and at some point your residential growth is going to stop. Now you don't have assessment growth. Now you got to go back and when I was elected, a 1% property tax increase got you $30,000. Well, in 2010, you couldn't do anything with $30,000 to get by. So I think both those townships had a large reliance on assessment growth. Residential construction now is virtually dead in the province, and now it's causing probably that is not alone in causing the problem, obviously, but it starts to expose other weaknesses like low reserves, maybe higher debt, and you have all these capital projects you need to do. So
assessment growth means more people are paying property taxes,
right?
So you keep them the same, and that way, that's how you get away with not increasing. So what are we going to do now?
Well, I think what's interesting is...
I think we should amalgamate.
Are we jumping to that already?
I just think that would be an answer.
Not necessarily.
But it would be an answer.
Sure, it is. Like, it's always like number one, do nothing. Number two, you amalgamate. Number three. So number three is, what are they doing now? So I think it's interesting to look at the two approaches that's happening here. And I think a lot of people should consider this. And I think people in municipal governance and education should be taking a look and watching what's happening here. Because when I watched Woolwich, I didn't really hear much talk about the strong mayor power. And I heard a lot of councillors all participating, and there was budget suggestions and ideas put forward, and they had stuff to look at and comment upon, right? And then when I watched Wilmot, it just dawned on me that there was a greater discussion about the strong mayor power. And I just want to point out, you mentioned about KPMG coming on. The fact that they don't have a treasurer or deputy treasurer allows them to be able to spend the money to hire KPMG. Okay. And it's not because they lack the ability, resources. Well, they do, because they don't have a treasurer and a deputy treasurer. But if they had a treasurer and deputy treasurer, I'm sure they would be capable of preparing a budget. But I think this is a great opportunity to bring in KPMG as long as the outside company firm is direct and exposes everything.
But does this then remove at least one layer of visibility to the other councillors in Wilmot?
Well, it's not. The fact that KPMG there is not. The strong mayor part is, okay, because they had their meeting and all they had was, I printed it off, take a look at that, I'll throw it over at you. That's the capital list that they had to look at. And you remember one of the delegates was commenting about, you can't hardly read the thing.
Right.
There's like hundreds of capital projects, and the question was, okay, what do we want to continue with? What don't we want to do? So this was what they had to look at. So it's not the budget, that's your capital forecast, right?
It doesn't get into operational then either.
No, nothing. So, but she did say, we're still looking at, they're starting at 9% for sure, because they're continuing that from last year. So they need that for their capital. And then they get into the operational stuff after that. But what the strong mayor said was, like, we're putting it together. You're going to see it soon. It's going to be great. It was a total different approach, but it's allowed. This is what Doug Ford has done. By inserting the strong mayor legislation, he has basically disrupted a system. Now, I'm going to say that the system worked fine for all these years. Someone might say, well, look, we've got all these problems. Maybe it hasn't worked fine. But what it's done, it's created almost an autocratic situation. I mean, it's democratically allowed, but a strong mayor. And I could see when you watch some of the councillors in Wilmot, okay, and they've got some, I'll say strong councillors in the sense of, they like to get involved in the debate. They like to get in and review, Councillor Sadu talked about, looking at the numbers and finding cuts, et cetera. And Councillor Wilkinson was asking questions too about the process. I think councillors are going to be frustrated. I know I would be frustrated in a strong mayor situation, because you're basically just say, here's the budget. And we had that with Kitchener, and we had that with Cambridge. Here's the budget. If you want to make some changes, I'll think about it. And you've got to have, a 2/3 majority to pass it, to override any of my vetoes. So I think it's going to be a very interesting situation. And Mayor Shantz could do that too. She could bring in a strong mayor budget, say, okay, this is the budget, this is what it's going to be, and move on.
Or we could amalgamate.
It would still have strong mayor powers. It's funny, the region, I don't believe the region has that though. So I don't think the regional chair has that, right? It's just the city mayors and township mayors. But it doesn't apply to North Dumfries, because you have to have 5 or more councillors. We've got 4.
All right. Rob Deutschman joins us Wednesday mornings, 11:30, for a little political R&D. It's tough budgeting right now in the townships. And $180,000 roughly is what it's going to cost us more to pay councillors in Waterloo, with the salary increases that are recommended for them. We'll talk about that as we continue with Rob Deutschman, political R&D, here on the Mike Farwell Show this morning. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Wednesday mornings, 11:30. The former mayor of North Dumfries Township, former regional councillor, Liberal candidate in the last provincial election.
This is the former show.
Rob Deutschman joins us for political R&D. Good work if you can get it, Rob. A 13% increase for the mayor of Waterloo is proposed, and a whopping 32% increase for the compensation provided city councillors in Waterloo.
Okay, I just want to talk about the process, which I thought was interesting. And I know you kind of talked about it in your article today as well. When I was mayor, we had this thing where we said, okay, well, look, we're a little township, and we actually had lost one or two people to like a large, like the region or the city of Kitchener. And that's one of the downfalls of when you're in a small township is you're losing people because you can't match the pay or what have you, or the benefits plan or the pension plan or what have you. So we said, okay, well, let's do an assessment. I'd never been through one of these because remember I was mayor, I hadn't been on council before. And so they come back with a report, and it's a report it's similar to the report that Waterloo had for the councillors. And so this is for staff. And so it's like for certain staff positions, we looked at like 6 to 8 other municipalities and see what they pay and where do you rank on there. And lo and behold, we're like the bottom 1 or 2. And so then they say, well, in order to bring you to the middle, right, we'll bump you up to whatever the middle one is. Now suddenly, and I look at this, I'm going, well, I mean, if everybody's doing this, everyone's moving up and up and up.
Exactly.
Now the ones that were just above me, I jumped ahead of them. Now they're at the bottom. They're going to jump ahead of me.
So Waterloo compares to St. Catharines, to Brantford,
right,
to
but
Vaughan.
let's step back for a sec. So, I don't think you should be comparing councillors and mayors and using that approach to staff and using that approach. Okay, if you want to use that approach for staff, I can see that because staff can leave and go to other jurisdictions, right? You can take a job. If you're in Kitchener, you can go take a job in Waterloo. You can go take a job in maybe St. Catharines like this. But if you're a councillor or a mayor, you're only running in one place. You're not running anywhere else. So you're not running in Kitchener. You're not running, if you're in Waterloo, you're not running in Kitchener. You're not running in St. Catharines. And Mike, honestly, if you asked candidates, what is the pay for the position that they're seeking during an election, they wouldn't know. We didn't know. I asked during the last regional council elections, I'd asked some of the people, we didn't know what the pay was.
But we should pay people a reasonable wage so that we, listen,
hold on, let me finish.
If you don't want monkeys, don't pay peanuts.
Okay, well, I'm not sure what you're trying to say, but, 1,000 monkeys typing on a typewriter can create Shakespeare. But anyway, so I don't know what you're saying there because...
I'm saying you should pay people well.
No, but it's if no one steps up to run, then you're going to say, why is no one stepping up to run? But we have lots of people that run. We have lots of good people that run. Anyone can run. Okay, we shouldn't say, like, in your article you said, attract quality candidates. I just beg to differ. It's attract candidates, period. Anybody. Like, what's a quality candidate? I mean, anyone can run. The people can decide whether the person that is seeking office is the right person by looking up their background, looking at what they've done, all of that, listening to what their proposals are, and then deciding whether they want that person or not. So people put themselves forward because really it's about contribution to your community. Most people run because they were like involved with their local neighborhood association, and then someone at the neighborhood association said, you know what, you should run because, that Mike Farwell, he's been our candidate for our councillor for a long time, and we hate the guy. Get rid of that guy. So they run because of what they've done before. And so they don't run, they say, well, hold on, what's the pay? Because this job is temporary. This job is for 4 years. Now you're back in front of the hiring committee, which is the whole of your riding or ward. And so you're up for job renewal all the time. There's no, there's no consistency in the job. All right. And really, my personal view is this is a job where you're like volunteering for your community for a period of time, like you're volunteering on some board. And a lot of boards have like, we can talk about term limits where they say you can be here for 8 years and then you got to go.
Oh, tell me about it.
All right.
I've been on boards like that, but councillors can stay forever.
But you don't need to bump up by, especially, with respect, this is a very difficult budget year. The region's trying to get down to under 5%. And we're talking about 15% and 30%. Yeah, and the only reason they picked those numbers was because the audit committee, which this is not their main their main role in Waterloo. I looked them up. That's not their main role, but they're undertaking this. Staff comes back with this review of these 6 communities, and then you say, well, we'll pick the one in the middle, which was St. Catharines. Well, St. Catharines is a population of about 150,000, which is about the same as Waterloo. But Waterloo's population gets bumped up by the university kids and the college kids every year. So we're not. It's hard to compare apples to apples in terms of community. But if you had a situation where in Waterloo we weren't getting quality candidates, and I look at that council and I am impressed with all of those people that are on that council in Waterloo. So it's not a question of finding quality people. The pay is obviously fine, but they're not doing it for the pay.
We should set a rate. Final minute. We should set a rate and then give annual 2% or 3% cost of living increases.
I agree with that.
This is, you're right. It's a tough budget year, and all of a sudden you're talking 13 and 32%. Not a good look.
It's not a good look this year. I don't think it's necessary, frankly. I think you just bump them up by whatever you're paying your executives in terms of their salary increase, and that's the same extended to council.
Makes perfect sense. Did we just agree on something?
Yeah, that's scary. It's
scary for you.
I like find a new show.
It's my favorite political R&D ever. No increases for you. And I'm going to worm you up on amalgamation.
I think you should give it all to Farwell.
I'll take it. Because guess what my increase was this year?
I don't want to ask. It's private, personal.
1.5. I'll share that with you.
1.5?
There you go. 1.5, baby. Not 13.
Man.
Not 32. 1.5.
You're underpaid. Let me know if you need some legal representation in your next negotiation.
Work on that.
Pro bono.
I like that even better.
Because 25% of whatever it is not going to be much. So.
Rob Deutschman joins us Wednesday mornings at 11:30 for Political R&D. Thank you, my friend.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Have a good week.
You too. The Talkback Hour is coming up. We touched on something earlier when it came to living wage and how it is that big companies make so much while paying people so little. And I got a lot of emails about that. We'll explore that in Talkback. So stay with us on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
Just finish cleaning up your room. Let's see that dust fly with that broom. Get all that garbage out of sight, or you don't go out Friday night.
Don't talk back.
As opposed to not talking back, this is the hour we encourage you to do the opposite. Talk back to us. Every day, noon until 1, your reflections perhaps on a story that we've already discussed today or something else in the news that has caught your attention. Happy to hear your perspectives on the issues of the day. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. We will start with Jersey Bill on Talkback today. Good afternoon, Billy.
Yes, on this issue of municipal compensation, I remember reading an article. It was 25 years ago. And it has to do with a single person. He had been elected mayor of Milton, I believe, at the same time that he was the chief administrator at a bureaucratic job for Brampton. Now, of course, Brampton, I think, and then they showed his salaries because of that sunshine list stuff. So in Brampton, he was getting $130,000 a year. In Milton, he was getting like $60,000 for being mayor, and then another $40,000 because he was on the county council. So then people asked him, he said, well, what happens, because, Brampton and Milton are pretty close together. What happens if there's a disaster that takes in both cities? Where's your responsibility? He says, well, of course, I'm going to go to Brampton as a city administrator. He said, what about Milton? And he said, well, of course, I have my own city administrator who probably was getting paid more than he was as mayor, and he'll take care of that problem. And then when they pressed him more, he said, well, Milton's getting all this good experience I have from all my years of working in the public service. I just thought that was amazing. Talk about a double dipper.
That is a wild story, Billy, and thanks for sharing it. The city administrator, the chief administrative officer, is the highest paid municipal position, so would be making more at a staff level than the mayor of that particular municipality, for sure. And double dipping, I think it was Jim shared with me an email a couple of weeks ago about a councillor. I forget the township, but not too far from here. It's somewhere in southwestern Ontario that had run for or applied for the position of CAO. So you're on council, you want to be the chief administrator of that municipality, but you don't resign your seat. You just take a leave from your elected position, just in case you don't get the CAO's job, right? And then you could just stay as a councillor, because why resign if you don't have to? The rules allow you to stay. He did get the role as the CAO, and now there's a vacant council seat. With the issue more generally, though, I feel for these folks whose salaries are made public, and then we can all discuss and dissect what they're being paid and whether or not we think that's appropriate. There are a couple of things, and I think Rob Deutschman made a really interesting point in the last half hour. Nobody runs because of what they're being paid. They run because they believe or they have a desire to help their community. They believe they can help it, or they want to do something for their community. Nobody's doing it for the money. So why should we increase the payment at all? But two of the things, frankly, that I think have to happen when it comes to compensation for our municipal councillors. Number one is we have to get to a rate that we determine is appropriate in this day. So let's just use $58,000 for councillors in Waterloo, okay? So you're going to increase it to that. Now you're there. Have the increases then built in annually with a cost of living increase, just like most of us in the public sector, right? You get 0 to 4% or whatever your company does, if you're lucky enough to have any increases. But we have to stop this situation whereby there hasn't been an increase in 8 years, and now you're going to increase by 13% in the mayor's case or 32% in councillor cases. You can't do that. That is not palatable to the public, especially when you look at the pressures on municipal budgets today. We're all feeling it in our houses, and you're going to say, it's a 32% increase. The audit committee has determined that's the appropriate amount. It's not. Build in regular increases so that we're not going through this exercise. I think that would be important. The other thing is with the comparators that are used, and Rob Deutschman and I talked about this in the last half hour as well. So you look at 6 or 8, I think the audit committee in Waterloo looked at 8 other municipalities. And so you find the middle point and you say, okay, this is where Waterloo's going to end up. Well, if you go from whatever point you were, 8th to 5th, somewhere in the middle, well then the 6, 7, 8 behind you are just going to use you as the next comparator, and they're all going to keep leapfrogging over you. And it's a never-ending cycle of ascension up that ladder, if you will. And as far as I'm concerned, what gets forgotten in that is the average Joe and Jane, you and me, who are footing the bill for all of this. So those two things I would like to see change when it comes to how we establish council salaries. One is take away the comparators, because all that does is lead to constant increases as one comparator jumps over the next. And 2, build in to the salary a regular increase of, say, 2% cost of living allowance, right? And I know inflation, I know, but let's just say we're going to use 2% and do that every year so that you're not coming to the public after 8 years of no increases saying we need 32%, because that doesn't cut it for me. Back to the phones on Talkback. Conservative Charlie, good afternoon.
Hi, Mike. I listened with interest. You talk with Mr. Deutschman about these township mayors not being able to control their budgets, the spending, and this and that. And I'm thinking to myself, yet every township mayor, they voted for the LRT extension. And speaking about a comparison on that, I've never heard anybody bring up about the Eglinton Crosstown LRT on your show or on any other show. They don't seem to want to talk about the Eglinton Crosstown, just for comparison. This crosstown was initially supposed to open in 2020, Mike. But due to numerous technical issues and cost overruns, its completion date is repeatedly delayed, and more recently, it missed another projected September 2025 opening, Mike. You know, phase 2 of the ION is supposed to be 17 kilometers at 3.5-something billion. Well, the Eglinton Crosstown LRT is 19 kilometers long. It was supposed to cost $5 billion. The latest estimates put it at $12.81 billion. So maybe they ought to take a look at this, because if you think your taxes are going up now, dig into this thing. Who knows what it could be, Mike?
Charlie, appreciate that. What I will say, by way of reminder, is the Eglinton Crosstown in Toronto is a Metrolinx provincial transit agency project. Metrolinx has been beset by problems too numerous for me to get into. So there is that element to it. I would argue, have a pretty good case study in LRT Phase 1. Did a pretty damn good job. we did not go over the $868 million budget, ran a little bit behind in timing, but the budget stayed intact. So I think we've got a good case study to show that we can do this effectively internally. We would not have Metrolinx involved, to the best of my knowledge. That said, I totally get where you're coming from. It is a massive undertaking that we're talking about here. And I'm with you. It makes me nervous. It does. We look at ridership numbers. Ridership on LRT or on transit in general is actually down in the years since LRT opened in Kitchener and Waterloo. I get it. I'm trying to think 50 years down the road. I'm trying to think of our kids, many of whom don't have licenses now, expect to be able to get around their communities without a car. They don't care if they could get there in 15 minutes with a car because they don't know what that's like. They'll just take the 45-minute train ride from Fairview Mall to Conestoga Mall, for example. And, of course, the development that comes along with the fixed tracks that LRT brings. But your concern, I understand, is absolutely warranted when we're talking about a project that is $4.5 billion in expense. Jim is next on Talkback. Good afternoon, Jim.
Hey, Mike, how are you? I'd just like to share an idea I had regarding council salary.
Sure, I'd love to hear it.
What if council salary is reflective and their comparators are their municipal employees, and they take an average of the different municipal employee workforces for that year? And if the average is a 2% wage increase for that year across their, emergency services to outdoor works to park and rec services, then that's the salary that the council themselves would also receive.
I think you're spot on, Jim. In fact, the audit committee in Waterloo was recommending that in the future now, the increases annually get tied to whatever is in that staff agreement. So I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think that's fair for all. We don't want people to not receive a fair wage, and we don't want people, good qualified people shying away from politics because of a low wage or overworked, compared to the wage. But some form of sharing that across all taxpayers for council themselves would avoid these costly expenses now. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jim. An excellent suggestion. And as I said, the audit committee in Waterloo is recommending that in its report. Waterloo Council is going to be considering this at its meeting next Monday, the 17th. Look, they'll vote in favor. And remember, they're not voting in favor of increasing their own salary tomorrow. This would take effect the next term of council. As I already outlined, and I won't go into again, I think there are ways to improve this process. And Jim just touched on a big one. Let's just bake in the regular increases. And you know what we'll do? You know how we'll bake them in? We'll attach them to the same increases that the staff association gets through their collective bargaining. Easy peasy. And then we're not going to be sitting here as a tax-paying public saying, what do you mean you're getting a 32% increase? Who gets a 32% increase? Councillors in Waterloo are about to get one. Talkback continues here on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Talkback is your daily opportunity to gather around the old water cooler here on the show. We open the phone lines so we can hear directly from you. Maybe there was an issue we discussed earlier you didn't get a chance to have your say on, or something else that's going on that you want us to know about. By all means, take advantage of the opportunity. Give us a call and start the conversation. Sean is next. Good afternoon, Sean. You're on Talkback.
Good afternoon. Rob, I was listening to Rob Deutschman, and yeah, a lot of people don't think about the remuneration when they decide to run for office. And in a perfect, ideal world, yeah, people would do this without thinking about that. But the reality of the situation is, people have to live. And do we want the ability to run for office only restricted to wealthy people that can afford to do without having to have a salary? Because if we want to hear from all corners of society, some people are going to need a salary to honestly run for office or to be in office.
Well, but the other side of that then, Sean, becomes take, for example, somebody in the private sector, or I'll use my dad as an example, who was 30 plus years as an educator. do you want people who then run for public life or run for office as a career, the so-called career politician?
No, but that's up to the voters, quite frankly. If the voters choose to vote them in again, if somebody's good at their job and they get voted in, well, good for them. If they're lousy at their job, they're going to lose, aren't they? It's called democracy.
Yeah, okay. You know what? And fair enough. Appreciate that point and that perspective. And Sean's not wrong. I was actually talking to a friend on the weekend that said it cost him about $10,000 to run, when he tracked all of his expenses from the signs, the driving around, the time off work to canvas, etc., cost him about $10,000 to run in an election that he did not win. In fact, one of our regular listeners, Clinton, who's Farwell's Force member number 35, mentioned earlier when we were talking about pursuing a public life, we had the Honorable Sergio Marquis on the show talking about his new book, How to Succeed in the Political Arena. And Mr. Marquis was concerned about the scarcity of particularly young people in elected office. And if we don't get them interested, we're going to miss out on all of those new ideas that can be generated from younger minds with far different perspectives than the older people who tend to hold office. I think he's onto something. And of course, when we look at how divisive and polarizing politics can be, when we look at the criticisms leveled at politicians, etc., can be a very difficult arena to make one's living. So he writes the book as kind of a roadmap for people considering it, trying to encourage them to consider it, break down some of those barriers, because Mr. Marquis is worried that we're losing out on those important perspectives. And Clinton's email to Mike at 570news.com said he's considered it. But right now, given a host of other things, including the cost of running a campaign, can't do it. Can't do it. So to Sean's point, do you make the salary attractive enough so that you are able to attract candidates who really, if it weren't for what they got paid to do the job, wouldn't be able to do the job? Because you are, to a certain degree. That was a long-standing criticism that I can recall going back when it comes to council salaries. A lot of people did it in their retirement because the salary, such as it was, $20,000, $30,000 a year, was just a nice little retirement income on top of, when we go back in time, people tended to have pensions from their workplace, right? So you'd supplement your pension with whatever you were making as a municipal councillor or a school board trustee. And those were the people that got attracted to it because everybody else was too busy out there making a living. So you are actually excluding a portion of your community by not offering an attractive enough compensation package. I struggle with it. I do, because there are a number of things that I've already outlined. I think the process needs to change, whereby the increases happen regularly throughout the life of one's term as a councillor, so that we're not coming to the community after 8 years of no increases saying we need to increase the mayor's salary by 13% and the councillor's salary by 32%. That's a lot, especially like you wouldn't have known in 2017 the economic times we're in here in 2025, but in these economic times, an increase of 32% does not strike one as being necessarily appropriate. And we call these part-time jobs, and I know, and I've said this lots of times, lots and lots of times, it's the furthest thing from, because councillors do a whole lot more outside of their weekly council meetings. They're answering our emails, addressing our concerns, attending events, etc. Now, in fairness, there are some who do the bare minimum and might put in 15, 20 hours a week like a part-time job. And then, of course, you start breaking that down and you're making upwards of $60 an hour, and that's not a bad way to make a living. Interesting times. And Sean, your point is well taken, if you might be okay with the career politician. But while we're on the subject of wages, let's talk a little bit about living wage, because this came up on our show earlier today. And here in Ontario, the Ontario Living Wage Network has done its calculations for 2025 and found that on average across the board in Ontario, living wage increases about 5%. Here in the region of Waterloo, it's up 8% to $23 per hour. And we got a call from Mike earlier who said, I don't know even how $23 an hour cuts it today, given the cost of rent, the cost of groceries, etc. Mike sees people using the food bank to supplement their household incomes because whatever it is they're making isn't cutting it. Would $23 an hour cut it? And I floated this idea. Not that I want to go down too far down the path of the other isms, because I don't think any of the isms are perfect. But capitalism, which is the system under which we operate generally, has a lot of really big corporations making a whole heck of a lot of money off the backs of people who are working for very little money. And you can't help but wonder if there isn't some way to get us closer. I'm not saying a complete middle ground, but that scale could be balanced a little bit more, couldn't it? I got some interesting emails to that regard, and I've got a story I'll share with you as well. But what do you think? I mean, is there a way of saying X number of dollars profit is enough number of dollars profit? Or are we starting to mess too much with the system that has served us well? Capitalism? Would love your thoughts on that as we continue Talkback this afternoon on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Let's talk a little bit more about living wage, because we had a guest from the Ontario Living Wage Network on the show earlier today. The living wage, as calculated by the Ontario Living Wage Network here in the region of Waterloo, goes up 8% from last year. So it now sits at $23 per hour. But we got a call from Mike during that segment earlier today on the show, and he said, listen, I don't think $23 an hour is going to cut it. If you carry that over the course of a year, you're talking somewhere between $46,000 and $48,000 annually. And Mike, in his retirement, does some volunteering and sees people using the food bank to supplement their household food supply because they're not getting by. And he figures if they're paying $20,000 a year in rent and you're bringing in $46,000 to $48,000 before tax, that's just not an equation that is working for you. $20,000 a year in rent would be about $1,700 a month. I don't know if we could find something, one bedroom, because the $23 per hour would be for an individual. Could we find something less than $1,700? That's neither here nor there. The rate, as determined by the Ontario Living Wage Network, is $23 an hour. And Mike says that's not cutting it. And, if you think about it in the bigger picture with all of the price pressures on us today, he's probably right. So I floated the question, is there room here for some sort of shift or some sort of regulation? Because we know that a lot of people who are working for less than living wage, because the living wage is almost $6 more than the minimum wage in this province. And we know there are a lot of people working for large companies at the minimum wage, while those companies, and I'm looking at you, big box retailers and grocery stores, those companies are making billions in profits. And it brings up an interesting question around the isms. I'm on record as saying, and will continue to say, I don't think any of the isms in and of themselves serve us particularly well. And I've had this debate with my best buddy over a couple of adult beverages on the back deck. And this goes, a couple. We're not schmammered into a 2-4 here and then, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to solve all the world's problems. But this is just a little bit of background here and a wee bit of a story. This is my best buddy, and I affectionately refer to him as a commie. It's just for fun. But he is left-leaning, very left-leaning, rides his bicycle everywhere. So I like to tease him about being a commie and all his commie friends. And every time I see a story that would appeal to his sensibilities, I will send it to him with that same little joke, right? This is just the way we go back and forth. And despite that, despite our political, ideological differences, best friends. We actually align on a lot of other things, but in some senses, he'll often get onto these rants and tangents, kind of like me. I should give him a talk show about the billions of dollars being made by one person when the average person like him is making so little. And so here we are. And I argued with him one time in a friendly, best friend over a couple of beers on the back deck kind of way, that capitalism is actually the best of the isms, because if we didn't have it, if there wasn't a pursuit of the almighty dollar, we wouldn't have people building big companies that can employ, in some cases, thousands of people who then contribute to the economy, pay taxes, which funds healthcare, which funds this, which funds that, right? In essence, I argued with him that the ism that we operate under generally, the capitalism, is the best of the isms. But he pushed back. He says, but it doesn't always work that way. Yes, you get people who are earning and who are contributing to the tax rolls and these other things. But then you run into this situation where everybody is hustling to make the most of the capital, right? And they might forget along the way that there is a duty, let's say, to contribute back to one's community, to help those who are falling a little bit further behind. And we have seen that gap between those who have amassed incredible amounts of capital and those who have not been able to amass incredible amounts of capital. And it reminded me of this football pool. Work with me. There's a point to this. This football pool we used to be in together, my buddy and I. And it was operated by a guy that called himself the Supreme Benevolent Dictator, the SBD. And we realized on the back deck during this argument that that's what's missing from capitalism, benevolence. Nobody's going to force you to share some of that wealth, right? But if you were, by your nature, benevolent, you would share that wealth. And so clearly, not enough incredibly wealthy people are benevolent enough. I'll bet you they're giving away so much money that we don't even know, but it's not maybe getting to the right places. I don't know. But we decided that therein lies the imperfection of capitalism, because the benevolence might be missing from those who have so much. Led to a couple of emails, one of them from Joanne, who writes to Mike at 570news.com. You are so right. We do need to have this conversation. I've been employed at a retail store currently owned by Loblaws for 36 years. My current rate is $20 per hour, and I have not had an increase for 3 years. As I watch the prices increase and the profits increase and our wages stay the same with no increase in sight, it's frustrating, and it feels like no one cares. And Clinton's email to Mike at 570news.com. Well, speaking of living wages and grocery stores, it was just reported that Loblaws brought in $19.4 billion in revenue last quarter alone. Their profit, $794 million, and that's just for one quarter. To put that in perspective, if Loblaws had capped their quarterly profit at $200 million, they could have redirected the difference to reduce food prices by an estimated 4 to 5%. That's not a small number for families struggling with rising grocery bills. I understand the principles of capitalism, Clinton writes, but when it comes to essentials like food and shelter, there's a strong case for thoughtful regulation. And this is where I get a little bit stuck. Thoughtful regulation. If we believe in capitalism to create the companies that employ the people, that pay into the economy, that increase those tax rolls, and then the taxes get redistributed to support the community as a whole. If it's not working, can we actually say there is a certain amount that is enough? And I don't know the answer to that, but I do think about it. every once in a while. I mean, come on with your coming on. How much is enough? And once you reach that certain threshold, is there a way that we should regulate the redistribution of that wealth? I remember a tech company out in the Pacific Northwest. I think it was Seattle. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but this story was several years ago. And it was on the heels of a study that determined that $70,000 a year was the optimum income for happiness. If money could buy happiness, $70,000 annually was the amount of money to buy happiness. So the CEO of that company paid everybody $70,000 a year, including himself. Interesting way to, quote unquote, share the wealth in that regard. But here we are. I find it really interesting. I don't want to begrudge somebody who took the risk to build the company, to do the thing that everybody needed, and the profits they generate from that. But at what point? And how much longer do we watch this gap continue to grow? Because it is the wealthiest. There are fewer and fewer individuals and or families that control the vast majority of the wealth. And then there's the rest of us. And believe you me, not in my lifetime, not in your lifetime, not in many lifetimes into the future. But if it continues in this direction, there will be an uprising of sorts. You know there will. Because the people at the bottom will feel as though there is no way up. And then they'll revolt. And who knows? All of those movies that we've seen where the battles erupt, that'll be the world. I don't know what that point is. It's generations away from now. But we're going in a direction where the wealthy get wealthier and the less wealthy stay less wealthy. Do you regulate that? I don't know. Do we need to create a new ism? That's my 10 cents on the thoughts. Jesse is on the phone. Good afternoon, Jesse.
Hi. Good afternoon, Mike. My thoughts on this are the fact that we can raise minimum wage all we want, but until we follow what some of the Nordic countries are doing and saying that the top earner in a company can only make a certain percentage more than the lowest wage earner, they're just going to keep raising prices, and those wage changes aren't going to make any difference because we have a society where the tops are dragons sitting on top of their hoards and refusing to take any hit to that.
Great point, Jesse. And this came up earlier in the context of, it came up yesterday with the recycling changes. And if you're going to charge producers more, Circular Materials picks up what's in the blue box now. Circular Materials charges the companies that are creating the stuff that goes in the blue boxes. Well, then they're just going to pass that cost on to us. And then, by the way, are we getting a rebate on our municipal taxes because the region isn't responsible for recycling anymore? The key about what Jesse just said, though, Farwell's Force member number 134, by the way, the key to what she said is you cap the top earners' earnings at a certain percentage above the lower or the lowest earners' earnings. That's where I wonder, do you? Can you? What does that look like? I'm just starting conversation today. Brett, you're on Talkback.
Hey, Mike. I really don't think that this conversation is going to yield productive results when we start talking about capping people's income. Capital will flow to where it produces the best return. And so if Canada is going to act that way, we'll just continue to see foreign investment and even domestic investment continue to leave for markets where the capital is going to receive a better return on its investment. We talk a lot about, City of Waterloo, for example, being a living wage employer. What do you think that does to the budget of the city, and then who's paying the property taxes for it?
No, I agreed.
If we look at Milton Friedman, and he's obviously a very conservative economist, he argued back in the 70s and 80s that the best thing for the working people is not increasing minimum wages, but looking at reducing it, because that's the only way that you can have a true free market. More regulation is not the answer here. And on the topic of taxation, the top 20% of Canadian households pay over 57% of all federal income tax in Canada. So it's not as though the wealthy aren't paying their fair share.
So what do we do, Brett, for the person working for $17.40 or whatever it is per hour now, minimum wage, that can't get by in Waterloo Region?
$17.40. If you would have asked your parents, I'm sure they thought $17.40 an hour would have been a pretty good amount of income.
I would have thought so too. Yeah,
it's the costs that are making it unbearable. But the more that the government is printing money to try and fund programs that are laden with inefficiency and bureaucracy, the more dollars are in the system, the more inflation continues to rise, and the less purchasing power the individual has. If Loblaws is forced to start paying their employees $20 an hour, $25 an hour, get ready for bananas to cost 20% more. It's not hard to see where it's going to go. The more regulation, while it's well-intentioned, is going to have adverse outcomes. We thought the fight for 15 meant something. You know, years ago, I remember listening to you years ago. Fight for 15 was the big thing of the day, and now $15 it's nothing an hour, right? We need 23, and even at 23, we don't think we can make it by. Probably you need to be closer to $30 an hour or more to live comfortably, but I don't think that regulation is the way to achieve it. And while none of the isms are perfect, the more regulation and bureaucrats we have in the process, the less efficient the market will operate.
Brett, great points, and I'm glad you brought them to the show today because I worry. I think we're overregulated as it is. Brett's point, by the way, too, about the top 20% income households in Canada paying the most of the taxes. I remember that when Jagmeet Singh was still leader of the NDP and proposing this tax on the rich. When you broke down the numbers, Brett's not wrong. It wouldn't have amounted to much because the wealthy are already paying. I know they can hide some stuff in offshore havens and these other, but the wealthy in this country are already paying. And sometimes I think when it comes to the lower end of that socioeconomic scale, $17 an hour. If you start, how are you spending that money? Right? How many of the things in our, you want to talk about one of the other isms, consumerism, are we just insist that we need as opposed to just want? It gets tricky. We're having a conversation on Talkback. This is the Mike Farwell Show. More calls coming up. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. None of the isms are perfect. Capitalism under the microscope this afternoon on Talkback. Lisa, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. I'm going to do that thing that everyone hates. Back when I was a teenager, minimum wage jobs were what you got as a part-time job as your first job. Nowadays, minimum wage is what people are, for whatever reason, expecting to be able to live off. It's a totally different mindset than what it was. Like, you know, it was the shift that you got that was 4 hours and you made minimum wage, and it was your spending money because you still lived at home with your parents, and your parents probably had to drive you to the job, or you had someone pick you up. So, and another thing I thought of when there was another caller talking about the fact that there's a lot of people that are low income, and very few people. It's becoming more and more. There's a few people with all the money, and isn't that the definition of an oligarchy?
I guess when we look at it that way, it would be. And again, we have to make some decisions here as to what works or what we want. Julie, good afternoon.
Hi. I just wanted to add about, I think a lot of it has to do with the way the government's handled a lot of stuff, too. It doesn't matter which one's in there. If they have their own personal interests, then they don't seem to be unbiased about what's best for the people in general, like in the whole. And, like, I know when you had your talk show on before this, you were saying about, or the gentleman was saying about there was $598 million that is going to illegal immigrants or something like that. And it's like, why is that money being so wasted when we have so many people here that aren't getting those funds to help? Like, our old people aren't making ends meet, and they're the ones that have built the country. And now they are, like, deciding whether they should eat or keep their hydro on because they can't afford the expense of your apartment or whatever you're living in. That's
a great point, Julie. And you're right. It was healthcare and other subsidies for people who are here illegally. almost $600 million. And that goes back to Brett's point. You can collect as much tax as you want. How is it being distributed or redistributed? Rudy, I'm down to about 60 seconds. You get the last word.
Yeah, you're talking about Loblaws and profits there before. We have to remember just a couple of years ago, Gale and Weston got a $3 million raise that brought them from $9 million to $12 million a year. Well, that's profit he's making. So, yeah, he does pretty well.
Yeah, he absolutely does. But I would also, again, say, kind of like we talked about with municipal councillors, you want somebody that's going to ensure the profitability of your company. They get paid in lockstep with that. JB, Rudy left you some time.
I need you to be more careful with some of your language and your implications, buddy. You made a comment before the last commercial break around consumerism and minimum wage, and kind of implying that people on minimum wage are maybe more increased in consumerism and they're... No.
Don't put words in my mouth, JB.
I'm just trying to.
Okay, well, I did make the point, though, about consumerism. You bet. And if you're only making so much, how much do you think you need versus how much you want? I'm not saying it as a general rule, but I think there's something to be said for consumerism, too.
Fair.
Okay, well, then it's fair. So there you go. That's all I was saying. Don't put words in anybody's mouth. We're out of time. We'll put more words in each other's mouths tomorrow on the show. I'll be back at 9. I hope you'll join me then. My name is Mike Farwell. You are a force for good. Bye for now.